Hello, hello, and welcome all to something new. I hope everybody has had a good beginning to their weekend. I hope your Friday wasn't too bad. Scobalt, Kappa, good to see both of you. I don't know if that location's gonna work for chat up on screen. We're on a new scene because I had to wedge 2 freaking video feeds in, and that was a challenge. Fitting two oblong things into one larger oblong thing does not effectively fill the space. You may see. It applied half speed to the stream. I didn't know it could even do that. Well, interesting. But, so for today, we will be doing some Elden Ring lore watch-alongs, because I love Elden Ring lore, and we just finished the DLC, and it's only fitting that we learn about how anything works at all in Elden Ring, and so that'll be fun. However, so as to not sit here and simply, like content steal, I will be, continuing to play up here. This top is going to be me. We're going to crank out, and hopefully, by the end of things, I will make it to Melania so that we can have a nice comparison of, was the DLC bosses harder than Melania, like everybody wanted to claim. We'll see how well Melania goes. And then, who knows, maybe we can finish the game. But down here, I have queued up like 3 or 4 different videos made by vtuber, who is a fantastically skilled, generally FromSoft lore content creator. So if you're curious about any of FromSoft's games, lore, and stuff, you should definitely check vtuber out. I have the link to their channel in the description down below, so you should check them out. They're very good at it. There are a lot of other stuff too. They started doing more like narrative style stories based on like characters from Elden Ring and things. We're not going to watch any of those today, but they're very good. So I would definitely suggest going through those if you're interested in some more narrative stuff too. I want to make sure I like shout out Vadi, give all of the credit there, and put the appropriate links because they deserve lots of credit and attention, despite me sitting here, reacting somewhat to their content. But you should still go check it out. Yeah. Other than that, I'm trying to think if has been any interesting news. No. I was going to try to get some shorts done today, and then I didn't. I did other shit that had to get done instead, non-stream related. But I'm close-ish to a short. I need to get some shorts together to post up, try to get some attention. I do have the story time already all prepped for tomorrow. That's all done. That's ready to go. So we're good to go on that front. I have reached out to a new creator as well to potentially get another collab going. Similar to, hey Seaweaver, how's it going? Similar to what I did with Moo so long ago, as far as like a getting to know you style, just chatting stream. I've got another one of those potentially coming up. I'm working on dates and things, but I've reached out to a new content creator to get, to see if they'd be interested. And they said yes. We're just now trying to work around the scheduling thing. I did realize when I did that, though, I don't know if I can fit it into 60 seconds for a short. I might try. But when I did that, I realized, like, how often I see people on Twitter and stuff complaining about how badly people usually do, like, reaching out to connect with people. And I was like, I should do a tutorial on how you reach out to someone in like this pseudo professional sense to like try to build a relationship or rapport as like a content creator, because that's clearly a skill that like escapes a ton of people, and a skill that I certainly am good at because, well, I'm like, I haven't done it a whole lot, but I'm batting 1,000 as far as reaching out. And, you know, part of it is because you don't just fire off a random message to everybody that you think is interesting. You have to like work up to that point. You have to, you know, become someone that they're at least conscious of so that they will, you know, respond, and then, you know, all the other stuff that goes along with it. There's steps to it. But as I'm batting 1,000 as far as reaching out to people and getting them to be like interested in doing a collab. So I've got the skill set, I've got the tactics. I'll just have to make it maybe a short of it, because I think people, I don't know if people would like it, but it would certainly be useful to someone. I don't know if I can fit it in 60 seconds, though. That's the trick. I have to cram it into 60 seconds if I want to make it an actual short, and that's going to be tough. But that is neither for here nor now, so let us commence. So I've got queued up here the very first, it's not the first video that Vadi made about Elden Ring. There were several others, but this one is like the core Elden Ring's lore explained video. Just like the very fundamentals of what is going on in Elden Ring's lore. And so that's where we're going to start. And then I'm going to start playing on the side here, and we can have a little adventure.
Our story doesn't begin in the lands between.
Good. I think you can hear it all okay.
Cosmos, far away, with an outer god called the Greater Will. There are a lot of outer gods mentioned in Elden Ring. You can think of these kind of like the great ones of Bloodborne. They're distant beings.
I'm not sure exactly where I should be looking to like pay attention to the stuff.
These outer gods
got it all over the place.
Make their presence felt in the world. The Greater Will, maybe most of all. To this end, it sent a golden star hurtling towards the lands between. The Elden Star's incantation tells us that this golden star was bearing a beast, an Elden beast. The Elden Remembrance calls it a vassal beast of the
Yeah, so
Will.
surprisingly, it's actually like an alien invasion, interestingly.
Obviously, this is fitting in this case, because the Elden Beast
Which is pretty
occupied the
bizarre.
lands between on behalf of the Greater Will, and was a living incarnation of the concept of order. As such, this beast would later become the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring itself is made up of runes of power, some great, some small, that together represent a sort of logic for the world to follow. Thus, the Elden Ring represents order. The true nature of this order is a subject of constant debate and research undergone by fundamentalists. But two of the key fundamentals are the laws of causality and regression. You can think of the law of causality as cause and effect, where actions have consequences, and those consequences are new causes that branch out into infinity. These are the relationships between things. Then there's the law of regression that states that all things eternally yearn to converge and return to their roots.
Oh my god, I had a dot on me for too long.
The Elden Ring is housed within the earth.
I hate these guys. This whole area sucks.
The lands between. But it's very important to stress that life in the lands between did not begin with the Erd Tree, the Elden Ring, or the Elden Beast.
Hey, priestess.
The lands between were occupied well before the Greater Will came.
There
were other beings here. There were other factions here. There were.
So I don't know if he's going to go into it, but some of the stuff that he's talking about now, how there was like stuff here before the Elden Beast and all of that in the Elden Ring. This stuff is what is like, to me, some of the hardest to like, I get grasp. Like it's so complicated, and I think might be the divide between where George R.R. Martin like did the writing as compared to when FromSoft picked it up, because it's my understanding, and he might, I don't know if he goes into it. Also, I'm sorry for stopping on the creepy eyeball. That's my bad. It's my understanding that the way the split was that, like, George R.R. Martin wrote the sort of lore of what happened before, like, whatever that may mean, like, where the line of before is, whatever potential catastrophe or change happened, and then it was FromSoft who sort of picked up the rest of the lore, which is a really interesting way to do it, if that is in fact how they did it. And I kind of like that as an idea for sort of doing narratives in general. This idea of having, like, one author write you up a world that exists, like, the sort of like the current state of a world, and then have some other author or creative, like, pick it up and go from what happens after. You know, actually, thinking about it, that's sort of the way, like, D&D location, like, settings books work, actually. Like, a settings book gives you a world, factions, locations, you know, magic systems. That probably isn't something George R.R. Martin did, but, like, you know, it gives you a world to work within, and it's up to then the DMs to, as like the second creative, to come in and, like, do something new with it. I think that might be why I found it so appealing. I didn't actually make that connection until just now, but I think that's why I like that sort of storytelling so much, because I must have sort of subconsciously picked up on that analogy. But anyway, it also explains why there's so much complexity to, like, the before the thing happened, while also maintaining a tremendous amount of complexity of after, because they just had two authors that had all the time in the world and all the ideas in the world to, like, write both. All right, back to Vadi. Take it away.
Gods here, and there was even another great tree here before the Erd tree. And this is where a huge twist regarding the Erd tree comes in. So there are incantations in the game called aspects of the Crucible. According to their descriptions, these are manifestations of the Erd tree's primal vital energy. And I quote, "They are an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together." But how could all life be blended together in the Erd tree if the Erd tree appeared after life existed? Well, there can only be one answer: that the Erd tree is a parasite, and it took over a tree that existed here before. This ancient tree was called the Great Tree.
Oh, for freak's sake.
So the Great Tree was
these
almost certainly the location
assassin
of this primordial
assholes.
crucible. It must have been a very powerful primordial force for the Greater Will to have commandeered. It might even be the reason the lands between is important to the Greater Will.
Oh my god, he didn't die from that?
Enemies related to the Great Tree's crucible would eventually be looked down upon. For example, the knot talisman is fashioned from a knotted vestige of the crucible, and it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. Enemies related to the crucible are the Omen, the Misbegotten, and the Crucible Knights.
You know,
all three of them would be
Elden Ring
shunned,
does a really
enslaved, or
good job
imprisoned.
of
Those who speak for the Erd Tree
building a
don't want
universe
you to know its roots,
that has,
so to
like,
speak. According to the
interesting,
protection of the Erd Tree, in the beginning,
like,
everything was in opposition
things that
to the
happen
Erd
with
Tree,
time
but
passing.
through countless victories in war,
He's
it
talking about,
became
like, the
embodiment
certain
of order.
factions being looked down upon because they're
The
from
Erd
before.
Tree governs
Also,
all.
hey Whitney, I don't know if I said that. I think I was in the
Betrays
process of being killed when I saw you say
Become
hello.
one
I'm sorry.
with the order,
But hello.
or
And
divest
welcome.
thyself of it, to wallow at the fringes, a powerless upstart.
But the Greater Will needed more than a big tree. It needed loyal agents in the lands between. To this end, it has the Two Fingers, who
The
are
Fingers.
its envoys. The Two Fingers heirloom has a weird picture of them, but it reads,
Sure does.
"Of course, fingers cannot speak, yet these are eloquent. Persistently they wriggle, spelling out mysteries in the air. Thus did we gain the words of our faith." These words are interpreted by
Nice
finger
fingers.
readers. These are the undying old crones that you would have found throughout the lands between. They pass down the wisdom of the two fingers, or at least they used to.
Your fingers. Please, your fingers. I can read them.
Most of them appear to have lost their purpose, and they're desperate to read your fingers and tell you annoying riddles, since their two fingers are likely dead. And yes, of course, there are multiple sets of two fingers. You would have found their corpses.
I'm
on the
realizing a
tops of
problem
the
with these
divine
swords.
towers.
They do not have
Atop
enough
these
stagger.
towers, you loot the fingers in order to activate the true power of a great rune. Specifically, though, you are giving benediction back to your great rune. You're taking a blessing back from the two dead fingers, essentially. This is just one of many blessings.
Okay,
the two
thank
fingers
God.
can bestow, and
Don't
my
worry,
point
there's
is
plenty
kind
more of
that
those.
The two fingers clearly have more than just influence. They have real power on some level. The Greater Will needs these powerful envoys and agents because, while it's obviously incredibly powerful, it does seem limited by a few things. First is space. The Greater Will didn't come to the lands between itself, it sent an elden beast to do its bidding instead. Second is time. There's a moment later in the game where your pair of two fingers go still because they're forced to commune with the Greater Will for guidance.
When they are finished, the fingers will again offer their guidance. But
There we go.
thousands, if not tens of thousands, of moons must first pass. No matter for me.
Long ass
You-
time.
How will you ever manage to wait?
So the Greater
Although-
Will needs a physical manifestation of order. It needs
You know, that actually kind of raises an interesting question that I don't actually think ever really gets answered. Because I still kind of feel like there's a huge mystery about... Well, maybe he'll cover it. But, like, who... Oh, going on a date? Well, I hope that goes well for you. Like, who the Tarnished are? Because the nature of the world and its weird sort of pseudo state of undyingness, it kind of makes me wonder, because they talk about the waiting thousands of moons or whatever, and it makes me curious if you actually could. It'd be boring as hell as a game to play, but like, is that feasible for the Tarnished? Would they be able to, live that long? That's always... So I actually brought this up with some of my friends the other day, because they were kind of just asking about FromSoft games in general. Specifically one who hadn't really gotten into playing them before. And it's always sort of interesting to me how much of a sort of like snapshot of a larger time period that exists in the world of the game that playing the game always is, right? Because there are all of these complicated factions, but none of them seem to be in the process of making a move to do anything. It's like you're sort of like the only one with the agency to like make shit happen. And it's sort of odd. I don't feel like the passing of time is something that the games really sort of give you the impression of. And I don't really know... It might just be that the game is sort of expected to take, like, actually be across the order of days. Like, you just show up and just, like, shit happens immediately. But I always think that's sort of interesting, and I wonder what a From Software game would look like with, I guess, a broader implementation of, like, passage of time, right? Because there's never a time... There's, like, fade-outs and fade-ins when you're, like, moving, or, like, you get in a coffin to go to a new place. So, like, it's very locational, like, lots of broad locations, but not broad time. It's never like you know, and then you waited a week, like a week later, and, you know, things have happened. It's like, it's very rarely, if ever, that. I wonder what a game like that would look like from Software if they decided to almost tell a more straightforward story. I know that's not really their style, but I would be curious to see how they would. Anyway, back to Vadi.
Envoys to convey its will, but what it also needs is a god. Introducing Marika the Eternal. I have this utterly enormous mind map of Elden Ring's lore, and there's a reason she's at the center. She's essentially the
that's why
equivalent
I
of
never
Gwyn
bothered to
from
do the
Dark
lore
Souls,
myself.
Except, unlike Gwyn, Marika didn't just
too
crawl
damn
out of the dark
complicated.
and find power. To an extent, it seems like she earned it. We don't know much about her origins, except that she is of the Newman race, which is actually an origin that you can choose in the character selection screen.
I
Newman come
might
from
have picked it
outside
a
the
Newman,
lands between,
actually.
and are supposed descendants of denizens of another world, long-lived but seldom born. At some point, Marika was chosen as an Empyrean. What is an Empyrean? Well, an Empyrean is a being chosen by the fingers as a candidate for godhood. As an Empyrean, Marika received the aid of a shadow to do her bidding. So what is a shadow? Well, it's a wolf, shadowbound to its Empyrean by the two
Is it always a
fingers.
wolf?
Luna Princess Rani is another example of an Empyrean with a shadowbound.
Why is it
fist.
always a wolf?
You would have met Blythe. These creatures are the Empyrean's very own shadow. They are completely loyal to their needs and, by definition, incapable of treachery. Marika's shadow
I
was a beast
regret
called
strongly having
Malekith.
fallen off.
Every Empyrean uses their shadow in different ways, but Marika's sole need of her shadow was as a vessel to lock away destined death. So what is destined death? Well, according to Enya, it's the rune.
We're getting
of
bombarded
death.
by terms. That's the way it goes.
Goes by two names. The other is destined death.
We mentioned earlier that
Oh,
the
I
Elden
already went
Ring
up here.
is made up of runes, and at some point, maybe when she was chosen as a god, Marika plucked the rune of death from the Elden Ring. She gave the rune of death to Malekith, her totally loyal shadow, who bore a black blade imbued with this rune. It's kind of genius, really. In a single act, she removed the concept of death from the lands between, while also commanding total control of death through her shadow, who could deliver it at her whim.
Yeah, this starts to get complicated, though.
Some of you might be
Unintended
asking,
consequences.
If death is removed from the lands between, how come I can kill this dog? First off, shame on you. Second, from a lore point
True.
of view, that
Shame
dog
on you.
isn't really dead. It's simply in the process of its spirit or its soul
You
returning.
know, this takes
to
us
the
back
Erd Tree.
to
Catacomb dungeons,
second
for
order
example,
thinking
are
and
specifically
unintended
constructed near the roots
consequences
the
of
Great Tree for this reason,
removing
so that the Erd Tree can
death.
reabsorb their ashes back into it. This process replaced the concept of a death that you were destined to have. But this random spirit outside of a catacomb dungeon says it best. As another example of this theory, when you kill a major boss, you receive a remembrance of them. These are spirits, and they are hewn into the Erd Tree. In this way, thanks to the Erd Tree's grace, their spirits are immortalized, in a sense. This new form of death also explains what's
Didn't
happening
expect to get
when you
hit from
summon
that side.
spirits.
From ash
God damn
and
it.
return to the Erd Tree.
However, some spirits never return to the Erd Tree, and they rise within death as corpses or skeletons instead.
Some of this stuff really
So
makes me
this
ask
is
the
new
question
order,
why, though.
and it's
I'm really
important to stress
curious.
that it was in this moment when the rune of death was removed.
Why does it
when
work that
destined
way?
death was
Why
taken,
don't some make it
this
to
is
the
when order became
um,
golden order.
The forbidden
back to the
shadow
Erd Tree?
plucked from the golden
happens to
order
them?
upon its creation.
Specifically, this was Marika's golden order. So not only did she become a god and a vessel for the Elden Ring, she became renowned as Marika the Eternal for her removal of destined death. It was a
Yeah, go
huge
get my
part of
freaking
her
souls
character
back.
and her reign as well. However, Marika had
section
more
really
than just
sucks. I hate
death
this
to
part
conquer.
of the
She
game.
had wars to fight, as the world was occupied by many forces that could threaten her golden order. There was war with the Storm Lord.
See, I mean,
who
how
ruled
interesting
in
would it be
Stormvale, There was a war with the giants, who were masters of a flame.
To actually get to take part in some of those formative times, right?
That could twist time and thus slay a god. And finally, there was war brewing with the Carian royalty, who had previously
play through part of those conflicts, make choices, and then have time pass to show what happens because of those choices. I think that would be really interesting. It's quite a different style of thing than FromSoft usually does, though. So I mean, it kind of makes sense why it hasn't happened, but I still think it would be interesting to see how it could do it.
Who became known as the Lord of the Battlefield. His crown was warranted with strength, and while it was for this strength that Marika married him, he was also required to take a vow to conduct himself as a lord. To suppress the ceaseless lust for battle that raged within, Horalu took the beast regent Sarosh upon his back. You'll notice this is another example of a beast being given for the purpose of serving order. Thus, in this moment,
yeah, why are beasts so orderly? What's up with that?
To Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, consort to Queen Marika, and a certified demigod. Godfrey and Marika had 3 demigod children together. There was Godwyn the Golden, who you saw being killed in the opening trailer, and
yeah, sorry about that, Godwyn.
The reviled Omen twins, Morgoth, who guards the Erd Tree, and Moog, who became Lord.
This is some very well. You can really see George R. R. Martin's influence. This is some real
he was probably descended from
complex
anyway, we'll talk about the
royal machinations style
video, so subscribe for that.
Complications, you know.
Now, just know that Godfrey and his offspring were the first demigods, henceforth known as the Golden Lineage. In his wars, Godfrey led his 16 Crucible Knights into battle, who were named so for they fought with the primordial powers of the Erd Tree. Their incantations were aspects of the Crucible itself, and they likely fought giants, dragons, the Stormlord.
Oh, I'm not gonna make that jump.
To usher in their age, the age of the Erd Tree.
In Marika's own words, hark, brave warriors. Hark, my Lord Godfrey. We commend your deeds. Guidance hath delivered ye through each ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring for the age of the Erd Tree.
The Erd Tree would go on to be largely seen as a blessing for all of those in the lands between, especially those close to it in Leyndell, the capital city of the Erd Tree. The tree bestowed blessings. For example, the dew that dropped from its branches were like jewels.
Leyndell wasn't so good when I got there. It was a little rough.
Of order, and its roots reached far and wide, relieving many of the burden of death. In fact, Erd Tree burial was one of the highest honors a hero could receive. One by one, the previous factions of the world fell. The giants were put to the sword, and their fair god was killed by Marika herself. The ancient dragons broke down the walls of Leyndell, but met fierce retaliation. However, I think the House of the Erd Tree encountered the most trouble against the land to their southwest, Leonia. Here, the House of the Moon repelled their offensives time and time
House of the
again.
Moon.
And I mean that literally, because there was not just one, but 2 wars fought here. And in both of these, there was no victory for the Golden, nor for the Moon. And I suspect it was probably because of these lobsters. These damn things can snap
Goddamn lobsters!
And it's bullshit. Actually,
it is. It's bullshit.
The Carian Knights, who
I agree wholeheartedly with Buddy.
To wield sorcerous battle skills, and despite numbering fewer than 20, this power made them a match for even the champions of gold in battle. These enchanted knights were anointed by the Lunar Queen, a young astrologer who went on to establish the House of Caria as royalty in this land. With her bewitching lunar magic,
I have at least pushed her out of the way.
Where Glintstone sorcery was studied.
Ooh, I can hit from here.
United, the Carian royal family and the learned scholars of Raya Lucaria defended their home from the golden aggressors. At the head of this great golden army was Radagon.
Ow.
Lord Radagon was a great champion, possessed of flowing dragons, who came to these lands at the head of a great golden host, where he met Lady Renard in battle.
These 2 champions clashed fell in love and joined their houses.
Radagon once cleansed himself with celestial dew, repented his territorial aggressions, and swore his love to Rhaenyra, the Order of the Eldritch,
Finally.
the fate of the
Jesus.
conjoined, and all the wounds of war forgiven.
You might think it strange that the Greater Will would permit this union, but it's not too odd, all things considered. As with most From Software games, sorcery and faith are just two sides of the same coin, and both of these powers
Yeah, and
stem
faith
from the cosmos.
always seems to be better,
Rhaenyra and
annoyingly.
Rhaenyra were known to have 3 children together. Lunar Princess Rani, who inherited her mother's propensity for lunar magic, Radahn, who took after his father Radagon and would go on to master gravitational magic, and Rykard, who pioneered new hex sorceries and would go on to feed himself to a great serpent. It follows that at some point
Forgot
after
about
this,
Rykard feeding
Marika
himself to
began
the serpent.
harden
I mean, he's a
because
huge serpent
doubts about the
still,
Golden
but I
Order
kind of forgot that
she
he's just
had
like,
had a
yeah, that
hand
seems like a good
in
idea.
creating.
In Marika's own words, I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must you falter?
And it's at this point that we should talk about Marika's motivations, her character. This is surely going to be one of those huge points of debate in the coming years, but for now, my working theory is that she wanted to discover the truth.
I wonder how
behind
much of
order
updates
and the truth
have
behind the
occurred
Greater
on
Will, and she believed
people's
that
thinking.
bonds had to be broken so that they could be better understood. She believed that there was great meaning to be found in hardship.
Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto eternity.
For Lord Godfrey, his struggle
I need
ended
to find
at
the
the
enemy
end
down
of his
here,
campaigns.
'cause
According to his armor,
there
he
he
led
is.
the war against the giants, faced the Storm Lord alone. And then there came a moment when his last worthy enemy fell, and it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded.
Thank God.
In truth, he was robbed of his grace. Then Marika sent him away.
My lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven
Is
from
this
the
all of them?
lands
Do I
between.
have one more?
Ye will
I have
wage
one more.
war in
Shit.
a land afar,
Shit.
where ye will live and die.
This became known as the Long March of the Tarnished, as Godfrey and his tarnished descendants walked away from the lands between. But Queen Marika absolutely
that's
had a
right.
plan here, that Lord Godfrey and his descendants would one day return stronger, having struggled outside of grace.
Then, after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring, grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
Soon after, she found a new husband. Either that or a new husband was found for her.
When Godfrey,
Interesting question.
first Elden Lord, was hounded from
Yeah,
the
Turtle
lands
Pope.
between,
Everybody loves a Turtle
Radagon
Pope.
left Rhaenyra to return to the Erdtree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord. The mystery endures to this day as to why Lord Radagon would cast Lady Rhaenyra aside, and moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord.
Whatever
Ooh,
the case,
made it.
as a part of this union, Radagon's prior 3 children with Rhaenyra became demigod stepchildren, granted grace thanks to their new family tree. Rhaenyra was broken by this, and so was her country, Leonia. The Queen's set reads, when Rhaenyra, head of both the Academy of Raya Lucaria and the Carrion royal family, lost her husband Radagon, her heart went along with him. And then those at the Academy realized that Rhaenyra was no champion after all.
I realize
In the
I
wake
should
of
maybe
Radagon's
bring
betrayal and Rhaenyra's poor
the
judgment,
rock throw.
Leonia struggled with civil war, with the Academy of Raya
Probably
Lucaria on
better
one
to
side
replace this one.
and the Carrion Royals on the other. And it's
My
here,
rock
during
sling.
the age of the Erd Tree,
There.
that
Rock
Lunar
sling's quite
Princess
good.
Rani, daughter of Runala and Radagon, stole a fragment of the Rune of Death.
It happened during the golden age of the Erd Tree, long before the shattering of the Elden Ring. Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, the Black Blade.
As mentioned previously, Malekith was Marika's shadow, and he had sealed destined death in a black blade. Then a fragment, only a fragment, of this Rune of Death was stolen. And once this happened, Malekith went a step further in protecting destined death. He bound the blade within his own flesh, such that none might rob death ever again. It was too late, however. This fragment of the Rune of Death was used immediately.
It's already out.
To kill a demigod, Marika's own son, Godwyn the Golden.
Yeah, so
That was
got
the first recorded death of a demigod in all.
So this part where Godwyn is killed, it's going to cover probably more of it if I remember correctly. But interestingly, it's an interesting note that despite sort of the significance of Godwyn, and how much it's going to play into some of the other major quest chains in the base game of Elden Ring, there was very little that was explained or expanded on in the DLC for that. So Godwyn is actually a pretty significant question mark still amongst the lore. Like, he played a really big part, but I'm sure he's going to get to it. But the fact that he was killed by this Rune of Death while the state of the world is as it is, where people aren't supposed to be able to die, it has done a very strange thing to Godwyn in that his corpse persists, but his soul is gone. And so it's very strange because you can come across his corpse and it's all like mutated. And it's weird, and there's very little information about that, and I would love to learn more. I'm gonna die.
All history, and it became the catalyst. Soon, the Elden Ring was smashed, and thus sprang forth the war known as the Shattering.
That's what I get for turning on the video.
Really credible evidence that Marika was behind this plot to have a fragment of the Rune of Death stolen. There's also a ton of evidence that Marika is behind the entirety of your tarnished quest, but we'll talk about that in another video.
Which is pretty freaking weird.
All you really need to know, in terms of the timeline at least, is this. After the marriage,
Marika is like the mastermind. Very strange.
The Rune of Death was stolen. Marika went on to shatter the Elden Ring, and Radagon attempted to repair it.
Oh my god, what the
Ring
heck?
had been broken into runes, some great and some small.
Freaking asshole.
It's said that Lord
Turtle Pope.
Radagon harbored a
Love the
secret.
Turtle Pope.
A famed sculptor of the Erd Tree capital was once summoned to render Lord Radagon's likeness in giant stature. When he glimpsed the skeleton in Radagon's closet, and as such, it's said the great statue harbors his secret too.
Of course, the huge twist in Elden Ring is that
Oh, yeah.
Radagon is Marika. Or
Oh,
depending on
yeah.
what you believe,
Here's the complicated shit.
for she knew it was going to happen.
In Marika's own words, O Radigan, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me.
So
Thou art
those
yet to
those
become
who
me.
are
Let us be
paying
shattered,
attention, you might recall that
mine other self.
Radagon
From
was
Software is keeping something a little
also
bit open-ended, and
Marika's,
everything in Elden Ring's lore, this will also
like,
go on to be
husband.
one of the biggest unknowns as we move forward. For
Confusing.
example, the wording "thou art yet to become me" reinforces that Marika and Radagon were two separate entities before the shattering. However, in contrast, there is also evidence that Radagon was always part of Marika. For example, Enya says that
The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika.
but how can this be
That's pretty
if
weird.
Radagon married Runala and had those demigod children? The only way that makes sense is if Radagon was always Marika and he just went over there to seduce Renala long ago.
So
I'll
freaking
present
weird.
more concrete theories in the future, but on this matter, the most important thing is, what do you think? While you can figure out a ton of Elden Ring's story, not all of it is
pretty
open
freaking
to
weird.
interpretation. Certain things are, and this is one of them. And your interpretation is a big part of what makes this story special. At any rate, the union of Radagon and Marika seems to be a union
Okay.
of two fundamental opposing laws of the
Oh,
Golden
come on.
Order. We mentioned these laws earlier, actually. There's the law of causality, and Marika is an agent of cause and effect. And there's the law of regression, as Radagon is a character who aspires to be complete and regress together. So I have a theory that forcing these two
Oh,
beings that
God damn
represent
it.
these
I just lost all my
together
souls.
would have corrected Marika's demons.
This run down the Hailing
So,
Tree is awful.
She was imprisoned in the Erd Tree for the crime of the Shattering.
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and a vision's vessel.
The conjoined Radagon and Marika even had two demigod children of their own.
Weird.
Mikola and Millennia. These two children were born afflicted. Mikola was cursed with eternal childhood. and
Let's not worry too much about the whole genetic possibilities of that.
Even so, these
Hypothetically,
two children
that
were
should
both
just be a
chosen
clone.
As Empyreans. They were immensely sacred beings and eligible to inherit godhood from the Greater Will. Perhaps the Greater Will was just desperate to find a worthy successor, and indeed in the Shattering War to come, many would try to claim the shards of the Elden Ring, and they would try to take the throne, including, of course, the Tarnished, who returned.
I'd really love a deep dive on
which we'll talk
the-
about in the next main lore video.
Hold
I should
I'd really love a deep dive on like the logistics of how some of this shit works. Like the whole, oh yeah, they're the same person, but like also produced offspring. And sort of the natures of like Empyreans versus demigods. They might cover more of that, but it's all very esoteric. Oh, that's not the right. That's not the right slot. Heal. Heal. So, one thing that I am immediately observing, that this immediately feels way harder than the DLC. Like, trying to get down this goddamn tree, way worse than anything in the DLC. What the heck? All right, continue on. We're almost done with this video.
Mention here that if you become a patron, you'll see
Oh, he's
upcoming lore
advertising.
videos early, as that's one of the rewards you get if you pledge to the $3 tier. And
Yeah, if you like
keep my
VOD, you
channel,
should
really
go-
adds a lot of value to the
should
Souls
go get
games for
the
you, to the point where you pledge $20.
Patreon.
Then in this new tier, you'll receive a new mug every 3 months that has
New mug.
a unique design on
So
it to do
snazzy.
with the games by
VOD
From
works
Software.
a
There are
lot
4 to
with
collect. The
various
first one you'll get is inspired
art
by
and stuff
Dark
as
Souls,
well.
then Elden Ring,
A lot of cool
then
stuff that
Sekiro,
VOD
and
does.
finally Bloodborne. And they all have fantastic art that I worked on with an amazing artist named Chu. But anyway, I figured this is the right place to end this video because the information here is going to be overwhelming. I bet it probably was too overwhelming, you know? It took me ages to commit these names and the relationships they had with other characters to memory, so I hope you guys are doing alright.
It's crazy.
One thing that helped me a lot was that we designed an enormous mind...
Okay, next video. Now let's talk about demigods. Hit us up, buddy.
Are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika. There was Godwyn, Morgoth, Mohg, Radahn, Rykard, Rani, Mikola, and Melania, Blade of Mikola. Melania, Blade of Mikola. Melania, Blade of Mikola. And Melania. Not again, all these
Relatable.
demigods had fallen from grace by the time
We've
the
all been
Shattering
there.
occurred. But in this video,
We might
I
be
want to
there
mostly
again by
talk
the end of
about
the day.
origins of these characters, who these demigods were before the fall, and some of these demigods fell a long way indeed. Before he became this unsightly mess, Godwyn the Golden was quite the heroic figure. He was born of the promising union between Lord Godfrey and Queen Marika, and he achieved great renown for his bravery.
They made
wars, at least.
way too damn many characters with G names and R names. Too many. I can't keep track all that shit.
Marking the only time in historical record that Leyndell's walls had fallen. It's not clear why Grandsack's first attack.
You know, I don't know why I'm bothered going over here. I don't actually need to, like, do the whole place. Ah, shit. Ah, shit.
However, this was only the beginning, and a bitter war against
I'm just here to get to Melania.
During this war, the Erdtree Sentinels had an epiphany that the only way to truly protect the Erdtree was to become dragons themselves. And so, despoiling the corpses of their foes, the grotesque sentinels served the Erdtree, but fought with the claws of the enemy instead. In the end, the ancient dragons were routed once again. In a graveyard of swords.
Oh, shit! Oh, that's so much damage.
Here, we learned that
I just got hit by like 2 of those, and I just got absolutely cooked. What the heck? God, that sucks.
However, he did not kill Fortisax. Instead, he befriended him. And it was in this act that the...
So it's sort of interesting how consistent From Software is in its sort of treatment of dragons across a lot of their games. Well, and especially with the addition of the DLC, it again sort of brought in the possibility to like swap bodies to a dragonkin style body. There's like almost always in FromSoft games a path to being some kind of weird mutant. Oh shit! It did fire off. Mutant dragon guy. It's like they always. I don't know whose like permanent interest that is. Who it is on the team that's always like gotta do that, right? But it's somebody's. It's clearly somebody's. All right, continuing on.
Powers of the ancient dragons truly became a part of Leyndell. After all, only those loved by dragons can survive the ordeal of cladding their bodies in lightning. So, from an unlikely friendship,
all right, I just want to go. I just gotta go fast.
City, and the Knights of Leyndell learned to worship
run
the dragons
past
and wield their lightning. Lanciax, sister of Fortisax, even took human form to better commune with the knights. It was officially decided that the worship of the ancient dragons did not conflict with belief in the Erdtree.
I'm okay. I'm alive.
Of the dragon's golden
I've got the rot, but that's fine.
Everything
Everything's fine.
The golden lineage. But now let's talk about Morgott and Moog, the Omen twins, who were also born of Godfrey and Marika's golden lineage.
Well, let's
First,
just get
what
rid
is
of
an omen?
the
Well,
rot.
to put it simply, an omen is an accursed child seen as impure, as they are born with horns on the body and face. When this happens,
ladder.
the correct thing to do, culturally at least,
Ladder is better.
to cut off the horns of the omen, an act which usually causes them to perish. It's pretty messed up.
That is
But
pretty messed up.
Some omen do survive this process, and some omen are even given a cleaver, crafted specifically for them and awarded as a tool of war, although these weapons are bestowed with a readiness to take them away. We find one such omen in an Erdtree camp upon the Altus Plateau. Before you fight it, you might have noticed another omen nearby writhing in its sleep. It's said that omens see evil spirits in their nightmares, and I think this omen is
You know what?
dreaming,
I don't
haunted
need
by
this
the vengeful
anymore.
spirits of its accursed kin. This brings us to the Omen Killers, who are horrifying butchers of
Let's see
twisted
here.
conscience.
Maybe I
They
should
wear
move
these
this
horned masks that make
the
a
other
mockery
hand.
of the Omen's nightmares, and these
Freaking Omen
butchers
Killers,
hunt
they
the
suck
Omen
to fight.
and amputate their horns. The first Omen Killer was named Rollo, a famous perfumer who had to imbibe a physic to rid himself of emotion so that he could better perform his tasks. Remember, it seems many omen have their horns excised when they're very young. That's definitely disturbing enough to warrant an emotion-killing physic in my book. However, if the omen is born of royalty, then their horns are not cut off, but the omen is kept underground, unbeknownst to anyone, and imprisoned.
Underground you go.
For example, you would have seen all kinds of omen confined to the sewers beneath Lane Dell.
True.
Why are omen considered to be accursed in the first place? Some of them are clearly intelligent, so what's inherently wrong with being born with horns and great strength? Well, it's important to remember, I think, that this curse might only really exist in the context of the Golden Order. After all, those afflicted with omen horns are not able to return to the Erd Tree for rebirth, and are said to be born outside of its grace. But why does the Golden Order disavow the omen?
Oh, for freak's sake.
Well,
I
it's hard
can't
to
believe
say
you
for sure.
wandered out the door for
The
that
working
shit.
theory is that it's to do with the Crucible. According to this ancient incantation, horns were once an aspect of the Erd Tree's primordial crucible, where all life was once blended together. And with the exception of a couple of Crucible nights in and around Lane Dell, we know that the Golden Order has started to distance itself from most things that touch upon the Crucible. While things like horns, knots, feathers, and scales once grew on the human body and were considered signifiers of the divine, now
pretty
they're
good
disdained as impurities as civilization has advanced. We learn this from the knot, scale, and feather talismans, all of which are guarded by omen, or dropped by omen killers, no less. Unfortunately for the Order of the Erd Tree, these once divine impurities seem to crop up in some births, whether they like it or not. Almost like it's a genetic trait, as if it touches upon the crucible at the root of the Erd Tree.
Okay, how?
And so you have to ask,
That's
is it
annoying.
really a curse to be born as a graceless omen? Well, as with most curses in these games, I think that depends on your perspective. In any case, Mohg and Morgoth were omen royalty, and thus they were born into a wretched mire far below the earth, horns and all. Here they were kept under the strictest confinement. Each of them were bound with charmed shackles that were covered in roots.
Oh, you do not like the fire.
It seems very few people were supposed to know that they even
Oh,
existed.
I'm out of stamina.
Morgoth, for his part, renounced and despised his accursed own blood, but his brother Mohg embraced it. Deep underground, Mohg stood before an empty god, a being called the Formless Mother,
He's got a
who
lot of
graves
health.
wounds, a being capable of bestowing power on the accursed blood. In this moment, Mohg's accursed blood erupted with fire, and he became besotted with the defilement that he was born into. Here, deep below the earth, he would go on to build a dynasty of blood in remembrance of a mother, something it seems he never truly had. As for Morgoth, he was born into the same accursed fate as his twin brother, but despite not being blessed with grace, he loved the Erd Tree all the same, and even took it upon himself to crawl out of the sewers and become the Erd Tree's protector when the Erd Tree needed him most. In the end, he rightfully became the Omen King and Lord of Lane Dell. Omen or not, he was, after all, born of Godfrey and Marika's golden lineage. Of course, the marriage between Godfrey and Marika would be ended, and before long, Marika remarried with another man, a champion named Radigan, who Marika calls her other half. He became second Elden Lord, the king consort, but he also brought with him 3 children from the previous marriage that he had with a carrier named Rani.
Ah, shit!
Were Rani, Rykard, and Radahn, and they all became Daenerys' stepchildren after Radigan's
Okay.
union.
The damage outside of the DLC is immensely higher, presumably because of the Skagitry fragments that I had been gathering. Which, of course, is like, calls into... Alright, hold on. People ignoring the Skagitry fragments has to be the reason they were saying that the DLC is harder than the base game, because the damage is not even close to the same after I had gathered a decent portion of the Skagitry stuff. Like, it is not close. It does not feel close. Like, this is way harder. I'm gonna freaking go back to my more comfortable weapon. I was talking about this with another of my friends, and I think he had the right opinion, which was he said that it's not harder. It's just that everybody came back after having not played for like a year, and they just went straight into the DLC thinking that they were going to be like just ready to go, not realizing that like they were super rusty and they just got their asses absolutely destroyed, which I think is likely what happened. Like they needed themselves some warm up and they did not take time to do the warm up. Cuz it is this freaking run is way harder than any of the stuff that I was doing in the DLC. And I think a big part of that is the Scadgertree fragments that I had gathered. All right, back to
He
Vadi.
wasn't just the son of Radigan and an aspiring lord of the battlefield, he was also the son of Renara, who was head of the Academy of Raya Lucaria and Queen of Caria. So as a Carian royal, inclined towards sorcery, Radahn bent his will towards mastering gravitational magics, rock sling,
I love
gravity
Radahn.
well,
Radahn is such an
stars.
interesting
These
character.
techniques were taught to him in Celia, the town of sorcery, all so he would never have to abandon his beloved
Yeah.
steed.
He did it because he loved his horse.
His powers would be put towards a more
Oh, Radahn,
cosmic
you're the
purpose
best.
than simply allowing him to ride his own horse. Radahn was taught gravitational magic by an alabaster lord, a member of a race of angels with skin of stone who was said to have risen to life when a meteor struck long ago. And when his lessons were complete, Radahn uttered these chilling words.
Thank you for your tutelage. For now, I can challenge the stars.
I don't know if
And
that's
of
his
course,
voice, but that's okay.
the stars, and the very constellations would be halted by his strength. But of course, you kind of have to ask, why? Why was it necessary to conquer the stars? In
I
the
ask
first
why a
place?
lot,
Well, I have
buddy.
a couple of theories. Theory
lot of
one is
times
that
I'm like,
it was
why?
done in self-defense. After all, according to the sword gravestone, Radahn was protecting Celia. What's more, gravitational magic has destructive power, and many gravitational beasts are proof of that destructive power. A being named Astel had even come down to the lands between in the
Screw
past
you, bro.
and destroyed a place called the Eternal City. What's more, Celians are descendants of the Eternal, positioned right above the Eternal City underground, so there is an argument to be made for Radahn purely defending Celia for some reason.
There we go.
But it's possible
Criminy.
for Radahn to have fought in this conflict and to have made the first move as well. So this is theory 2, that Radahn conquered the stars as a preventative measure in service to the greater will. According to a set of astrologer items, the night sky cradles fate. There's even a banished sect of people called the Nox, who live deep below the earth in eternal anticipation of the coming age of stars and their Lord of Night.
He's got a whole video
Long
about the
ago,
Nox.
These people invoked the ire of the greater will.
Crazy eternal
So
city and
it would make sense
all that goes
those
into
in
that.
service to the greater will might have sought to arrest the stars and put an end to this fate. What's more, Radahn was just a huge
Oh, thank God,
fanboy
Grace.
of Godfrey, and he seems to have more loyalty to the Erd Tree than to the moon. Finally, the telescope item description says that the
Oh, yeah,
fate
the
once
telescope.
writ in the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order. So surely this is referencing Radahn's actions, and it levels the blame at the Golden Order. But putting Radahn's motivations aside, it's a fact that the stars were held back, and that this had great consequences for many, especially for the rest of his Carian royal family.
Let me explain. The fate of the Carian royal family is guided by the stars, as is the fate of Lady Rani,
go.
first heir
Cranking
in the
through.
Carian royal line. But General Radahn is the conqueror of the stars, who stood up to the swirling constellations, halting their movement in a smashing victory. And so, if General Radahn were
I
defeated,
don't actually want to fight that
the
guy.
stars would once again resume their movement, as
Oh,
would
there he is.
Lady Rani's
It's fine.
destiny.
We'll ignore him.
Lunar Princess Rani was the daughter of Radigan and Renala, and sister
Yay,
to
Ronnie!
Radahn.
Best girl. Ronnie, best girl.
Interestingly, if you look at her true body atop the Divine Tower, it looks like she might have also inherited the red hair of Radagon. Cool detail. But unlike
Interesting.
her brother, Radahn, she quite clearly took after her mother more, who was Renala, head of the Carian royal family. The House of Caria has this storied history, one that seems to go way back to the astrologers. In the Carian Manor, we find one of their treasures, the Sword of Night and Flame. It reads, astrologers who preceded the sorcerers established themselves in mountaintops that nearly touched the sky and considered the fire giants their neighbors. Renala herself was an astrologer, always chasing the stars in her youth. Then she met the full moon, and in time, the astrologer became a queen, establishing the House of Caria as royalty. Caria appears to have a matriarchal hierarchy, with multiple princesses and Carian knights that serve as their retainers.
I wonder if that was a
Now,
response
however,
to
there is
anything,
only one
having like a
princess,
matriarchal
Rani, daughter of Renala.
society.
And at the time of her birth, she would have been said to inherit quite a lot of power indeed.
Yay, Rani.
For the Carian royal family was
Rani
at
is one of the
height,
most interesting
and her
characters.
mother was not only queen, she was
Like,
also head of the academy.
outside of
Fire
being,
Caria,
like, actually
having
adorable.
bewitched them with the enchanting power of the full moon.
It's also just
Leading
really
young
interesting.
Rani by the hand, Renala guided
Rani's
her
ending
daughter
is the
to a
most
meeting
popular
with a
ending.
moon of her own. What Rani
Most
beheld
common.
was cold, dark, and veiled in occult mystery. A dark moon, a sort of twin to Renala's own full moon. You can even see both of these hanging in the sky if you stargaze from the heights of
It's
the
cool.
Moonlight Plateau.
Secret
Another
moon.
who guided Rani was a character called the Snowy Crone, who the young Rani encountered
Snowy
deep in the
Crone.
woods.
I
When
don't
you look at
remember
Rani,
that.
it's actually the likeness of this snow witch that you're seeing, as the doll that now houses Rani's soul was modeled after her, probably as a sign of respect. Clearly, Rani looked up to her.
Oh,
as
why did my...
mysterious
What happened to my
became
freaking lock
Rani's
on?
secret mentor, and she even knew about the dark moon, teaching the young Rani to fear it as she imparted her cold sorceries. So, what do these moons represent? It's just a theory, but I think the moons kind of act as guides. The lost black moon
Stop!
for example, was the guide of countless stars. What's more, Rani and Renala were heavily influenced by their moons. Renala's moon bewitched the academy
Okay, hold
that
on,
she
like,
became the head
give me
of, and
this thing
Rani's
back.
dark moon, for its part, also imparts wisdom and leads a voyage in the Age of Stars ending. They could even be outer gods. And yet, for all of this guidance, Caria and Leonia as a whole have experienced steep decline. Radagon betrayed the House of the Moon. Radahn locked the stars out of motion. The Academy town is flooded to the north.
Bus
Caria
time.
has been ruined in the west, and the stars and moon have gone their separate ways. Nevertheless, Rani, last princess of Caria, remains, carefully setting new plans into motion. Sibling to Rani and Radahn was a man named Rykard, who was lord of the Volcano Manor. There is evidence that Rykard was friendly with the siblings, conspired with his sister Rani later on, and there's even a portrait of Radahn hung in the Volcano Manor, as well as a portrait of Rykard himself before the fall. Item descriptions mark Rykard as
Oh god, that was close.
ambitious, heroic, and blasphemous. A part of this blasphemy was opposing the Eldritch, which actually drew many knights to his banner. For
Sorry, Vadi, I'm having a very difficult time paying attention to you right now.
just as the gods did. And clearly many believed that he would usher in the change. The armor set that the Gilnean was what were once very loyal soldiers. The crest of red feathers are there to symbolize Rykard's pedigree as Lord Radagon's son. And the emblem of the red chest piece represents a lord who had lofty ambitions. However, as Rykard delved into the ancient secrets of Mount Gelmir, he came across the immortal Great Serpent, an ancient deity that aligned with Rykard's ambitions. So, Rykard fed himself to the Great Serpent so that he might devour,
Oh.
grow,
Oh,
and live
jeez.
eternally. Alas, this was too much for his knights, and they believed that their master's heroic ambitions had degenerated into mere greed.
God.
So they searched desperately for a weapon with which they might halt their lord. They found it too. The The immortal serpent had lived for a long time, and so there was also a weapon to kill it that had been designed as well. A serpent hunter. But it was too late. As the Lord lost his dignity, so too did Marcus.
Ah, shit. No! Damn it. I didn't expect a second shot. Together. A famous line.
Next, we need to discuss Melania and Mikola.
Balls.
These two were twins as they were born. No, right now, please.
Together.
As you know, Radigan's marriage with Renala did not last. Afterwards, he returned to the Golden Order and became Queen Marika's consort. But what I haven't yet mentioned is that together they were blessed with two demigod children, the so-called twin prodigies. Now, in
Practically
the last little
clones,
video,
right?
I briefly proposed that these two twins were born after the Shattering, after Radigan and Marika had merged together to become a single god. However,
guess that would make
I've
them
since
clones.
changed my mind. I think Melania and Mikola were clearly born before the Shattering. There's just so much proof that these two twins were a force that were influencing the world long before the Shattering took place. Anyway, both of these twins were born afflicted. Specifically, in the Japanese text, it's said that their births were vulnerable. Mikola was born afflicted with eternal youth, and Melania, for her part,
Afflicted
was
with
vulnerable
eternal youth.
to rot.
Youth.
Interestingly,
What an affliction,
Melania's scarlet
man.
rot is actually an outer god. This outer god, like many others in the game, seems to have an order that is able to be imposed
Let's
upon
get
the world
Lutel in
via
here.
an imperial
Let's
vessel.
just get this done.
Melania was that vessel. And while the scarlet rot is pretty terrible, you can sort of argue that it's got a beauty to it. According to Gowrie, the order of rot is resplendent. It's a cycle of death and rebirth. Kind of like the lotus flower, which is a flower that blooms anew, beautiful and fresh from the mud. I actually have art of this flower hanging in my home, and I really love the symbol of it. And I actually have lots of
shit.
art hanging down, and I'm going to talk about all of this artwork that you can buy at the end of the video.
Ah, damn it.
Melania, the
I saw that
Imperial,
coming.
was vulnerable to and afflicted by the scarlet rot. There was said to be no cure for it, and while fire and consecration seemed to be...
Oh, you know what? That doesn't actually help me.
Off,
'Cause that's only magic
Melania
damage.
would slowly lose her physical self to the rot. Interestingly, old legends of the scarlet rot have persisted in the world for generations, and we learn more about the rot god from the blue dancer. The dancer in blue represents a fairy who, in legend,
Oh, yeah, we really...
flowing sword upon a blind
We
swordsman,
got way ahead there.
blade in hand,
Oh, shit!
sealed away an ancient god, a god that was not itself. Specifically, this god was long ago sealed away in the stagnant water that is downstream of the Ainslie River underground. And wherever rot appears, the kindred of rot appear as well. These are pests and servants of God.
Stupid pests.
Now, in the current age, these are servants that have been forsaken by Melania.
There we go.
who
Got 'em.
Is their goddess. So, this blind swordsman with the flowing curved sword actually went on to become Melania's mentor. So, technically, it's him that we have to blame for this goddamn attack.
Oh,
The
that guy?
prosthesis
What an
wearer
ass.
heirloom tells us more. A talisman engraved with a scene from a heroic tale. Though born into the accursed rot, when the young girl
We're getting
encountered
close
her
to
mentor
Melania, by
and
the
his
way.
flowing blade, she gained wings. and
Tragically.
unparalleled strength. Melania's ridiculous attack is
It will
called the waterfowl
be
dance,
sad
and
for my
aesthetically
bones.
It makes sense that flowing waters would counter the effects of rot. For just as still waters turn foul, stagnation turns to decay. Thus, warriors must remain ever drifting. And indeed, Melania does resist the call of the rot. There's a lot of evidence that she's not really a willing vessel, but through sheer will and sense of self, she resists the rot. And only when...
You know, I just sort of realized with the fact that Vadi mentions here that the Scarlet Rot is like an additional outer will of some sort, like another outer god. Man, I wonder if that... I really hope they keep putting out more DLCs for Elden Ring. I don't know what their plan is, but man, I really hope there's more, because there's so much to explore. This sort of idea of what these outer wills are doing, like, I want to know more. There's a lot to potentially learn, and as well as there's still a huge gap with Melina, your pseudo maiden from the base game, that she's a giant question mark as well. Very unknown. There's just like the teeny tiniest bit of revelation that came out about her from the DLC, which is that she is the sister of Mikola, I think. Like, she is also the sibling of Melania and Mikola. And I think that's, like, really the only thing we managed to learn. Other than that, Melina is still a giant question mark. Why is it that she wants to do what she does? Which is, you know, kill everything, sacrifice herself to burn down the tree. It's all really interesting stuff. And sadly, we did not get new information from the DLC, really. Not a meaningful chunk. So I really want to get more information about her, more information about Godwyn, the weird corpse guy that just doesn't die, but is also already dead. And I'd love to learn more about these outer wills. Like, what is the cosmic chess game that is taking place, I guess you could say. Because obviously, more than one of them came to the lands between for something. But what is it that they're after? Are there other places that they're affecting to get what they want? What does that look like? What does it mean? How does it play out? I'm certainly curious.
When she is truly pressed in battle,
Carry
will
on,
she
body.
abandon this will and bloom into the goddess within. Melania's first bloom was during her fight against Radahn, and releasing her Scarlet Rot was a last-ditch effort that would forever taint the land of Caelid and cripple Radahn. So,
Caelid did not come out well from that.
Against Radahn, somehow it was worth this terrible act. In general terms, at least, it's clear that Melania was fighting for her brother. Apart from the times where she relapses into being the goddess of rot, she is known as the Blade of Mikola. She actually goes to great lengths to tell you this. I don't know if you heard.
She sure does.
Despite being the toughest
I've
boss
heard.
in From Software history, she's actually fighting for his right to godhood, not her own. In Melania's own words, her brother Mikola possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. He is the most fearsome Empyrean of all.
We may have learned new information about that. Maybe he's not so deserving.
Not the least of which was inspiring her armor and a prosthetic of unalloyed gold. And it's not just his sister that loved Mikola, many people did. The Bewitching Branch is an item that you can use to turn enemies into temporary allies, and it reads, "Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection." For his father,
See, that's a little bit
Mikola
weird.
fashioned
Compelling
and gifted
affection
to
is not great.
fundamentalist incantation called Triple Rings of Light. Radagon then returns the favor, gifting back an incantation called Radagon's Rings of Light. These interactions show some of Mikola's positive connections with his father and also Golden Order fundamentalism. And yet, the young Mikola abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Melania's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold. So, what is unalloyed gold? Well, an alloy is a composition of metals.
I know where one is.
Unalloyed gold is pure gold, essentially, with no external mixtures. This gold apparently can ward away the meddling of outer gods. And so Mikola bent a lot of his efforts towards creating an unalloyed gold needle. Specifically, this needle was crafted for his sister to ward off the rot and forestall the effects of the incurable rotting sickness. We see the bond between the siblings as well when we visit Mikola's Halig tree. We see a statue of a one-armed woman embracing a child, Mikola. In this place, we see the biggest example of Mikola's benevolence, the Halig tree, and the society that was built into the brace that supports it. This was a promised land, seen as a salvation to many who were shunned or persecuted, provided that they can actually find the path here, of course.
It sucks to get
like
here.
many other Empyreans, Mikola seems to have had the will within them
Terrible getting
create
here.
a new order. and his is an order that is somewhat modelled on the ones that came before it. The biggest thing is that the Halig tree is clearly inspired by the Erd tree. But the difference is that Miquella's Halig tree is said to be accepting of all, even those the Erd tree shuns. Miquella himself was once embedded inside of the Halig tree, and he watered it with his very own blood since it was a mere sapling.
Okay, cool.
Tragically, however, he was ripped out of this womb during the shattering, and his Halig tree ultimately failed to grow into an Erd tree, becoming a misshapen husk instead. But that's the story for another day. There's also a ton of cut content to do with Miquella, and he's one of the most mysterious demigods, who I'm sure we'll learn about more later. But
foreshadowing
that I want to mention before I go. It's kind of one theory I had during the making of this video. So Miquella and Malenia each have their own butterflies. Malenia's is the Aeonian butterfly, which inhabit the swamp of Aeonia and are rumored to come from the wings of the rot goddess herself. And I think it's fair to say that Miquella's butterfly is the nascent butterfly, which appears as if it's just emerged from its cocoon for its entire life. This is a reference to Miquella's eternal youth and his cocoon in the Halig tree. But there is, of course, a third butterfly, right? There's the smoldering butterfly.
Sure
it's
is.
said to be an eternally burning butterfly that serves as kindling. Now bear with me, but it's my theory that this butterfly is a reference to Melina.
Ayo.
The Blade of Calling calls the
This is why Vadi deserves all the credit that he gets.
This might suggest that Melina is a sibling
because that
to Malenia
certainly
and
seems
Miquella.
to have been validated.
Again, that's just a theory, but what I really want to talk about
Damn
here
good
is that
theory.
At the very least, Melina
All
is
over it.
almost certainly the daughter of Marika. We learned this a long time ago from looking at her name in the game's files, and we can further infer it from her dialogue, as she has a few lines that refer
She's
to
freaking
mothers
killing it.
and one that says that she was born inside the Erd tree. So her being the daughter of Marika is also just a theory, but this one is much more concrete than the butterfly one. Although the reason I like the butterfly
one's
theory
pretty
is that
good.
it gives us a hint as to who Melina's parents might have been. Her parents would have been Radagon and Marika, which is to say Marika herself alone, I guess.
Nailed it.
Radagon is Marika. Honestly, Melina as a character has only become more mysterious since the game was released, and I'm really
that is
only
true.
scratching the surface
As I
with this
mentioned,
theory.
she's
But
very
speaking of
mysterious,
times before
and I
Elden
really
Ring
hope
was
we get more
released,
about her
back
very
then,
soon.
A long time ago,
Well,
I commissioned this piece
next
from a
DLC, I guess.
renowned
There's
artist
no very
named
soon
Marco,
to be
and
had.
Now I'm so excited to reveal it for the first time.
Okay. Next. So this next one is specifically about Miquella. It's all of the stuff about but this is from a year ago. So it was everything we knew about Miquella then. It's also quite long. So it'll be interesting to see that, and then we'll finally go into the video of what did we learn in the DLC. Or at least the initial one. I'm sure there's going to be another one that'll have to come out eventually later about, more of what we learned. But this one
Is many things.
This one is, what do we know about Miquella pre-DLC?
Lord of the Eclipse, Saint Trina of the Cradle Song, and not just a demigod, but a fearsome Imperial who has been captured but is unresponsive for now. And after watching this video, I think you'll agree that Miquella is a topic that almost has to be explored further in some upcoming DLC. For how could they not be?
Man,
the character is surely
all
too
over it.
major, too foreshadowed, and too intriguing to just ignore. So, let's learn everything that there is to know. For starters, Miquella is the demigod child of Queen Marika and King Consort Radagon, who, as I'm sure you're well aware at this point, are the same being. You can learn more about the timeline of events from my other videos, but basically, after Radagon left Renala, the Academy told Radagon to go fuck himself, basically. But Radagon took that literally, and he sired a third set of demigod children all on his own, who were the twins Miquella and Malenia. These children appear to be represented by the butterfly items in the game, and the nascent butterfly appears to represent Miquella. Its description elaborates on his state of eternal childhood, stating that it appears as if it's just emerged from its cocoon for its entire life. Indeed, the word nascent means that something is just coming into existence and beginning to display signs of future potential. And that nascence is eternal for Miquella, and I think that this eternal nascence is incredibly important for his character.
Running.
Miquella and
He
Melania
does.
both seem to occupy
He's good at this.
different sides of the life and death cycle. That's not to say that Miquella represents life and Melania represents death. Rather, it seems like both land somewhere in the middle. It's
more like growth and decay.
Melania is
Shit!
constantly resisting a scarlet rot and is in this perpetual state of dying. And Miquella is in this constant state of nascence. He is newly born and showing an abundance of life and burgeoning potential. Special thanks to Quailag for making this clear to me. So Miquella is nascent, but he's also abundant, and I think that's another extremely key word for him. For example, there's this cut weapon called the Abundance and Decay Twin Blade, which symbolizes the twins.
Yeah, there you go.
Suggests that the twins were
Growth
born
it.
from an
Whoa,
inseparable
shadows.
fate and hold the runes of both abundance
Moving fast.
and decay between them. Not to mention, the word abundance is also literally spoken by Miquella in his cut content. And thanks to a very recent discovery by Secular Doobie, we know this cut dialogue without voice is Miquella speaking. And here, he appears to be leading you towards a unique ending for the game, and he talks about his ability to make life flourish, stating, "This is for thee, mine abundance, my drop of dew. Quench thy thirst throughout thy frame, blossom and burgeon."
It's interesting that there's like a cut ending.
Stronger, until the day cometh, when
'Cause
thou
I don't
canst share in my dream. Elden Ring,
think
Elden Ring begets
that
one
like
of
the
most
DLC
elegant
introduced a new ending to go along with Miquella, which is kind of interesting and almost surprising.
Content, and you shouldn't really take it as
Meow.
canon, but I think it does give us a deeper look at not only the powers that Miquella might have had, but
Oh, you
also
know what?
the
I should
world
equip
that he could create. He
this
goes on
again.
to say, "If thou covetest the throne, impress my vision upon thine heart. In the new world of thy making, all things will flourish, whether graceful or malign." And I love that final line. All things will flourish, whether graceful or malign. Because Miquella isn't enforcing any real notions of good or evil here. Instead, in the new world
And
of
that's-
his making, he simply wants all things to flourish. And
That's
I find that is
very-
a very unique viewpoint for a character in a Souls game.
Well, and
Not to mention, Miquella is certainly
so yeah, so that's very, it is very interesting, specifically of like the idea of flourishing doesn't matter what. But I feel like that is indicative also of a lot of the endings that have ever existed for Souls games and Elden Ring, just because there are very few that are like obviously good. There are some that are more obviously like bad. Dung Eater comes to mind. But broadly speaking, the endings are just sort of like they do a good job of making them relatively morality neutral. Like they're all a bit of a mess with obscure motivations rather than something obviously like, gee, I sure hope this makes everybody's lives easier. It's like, yeah, well, it's not quite like that. Anyway.
one of the few beings that is capable of creating this new world. That's because he is an Empyrean. He is one of the very few who were candidates chosen by the Two Fingers to succeed Queen Marika and become a god, to usher in a new age.
Here we are.
We could go into an entire debate about
I'm
why the
almost to
twins are valid Empyreans
Melania.
and why they were born afflicted, but honestly that could almost be an entire video of its own, so for now I'll just give the simple answer, which is that these twins were probably valid Empyreans because they have singular parentage from a god, but that this singular parentage was probably also responsible for their afflictions as well, due to the almost incestual implications of such a thing. Why do I feel like it was George R. R. Martin that wrote this part?
Yeah, right. You not want?
Anyway, let's move into the early childhood years of Miquella's maternal childhood.
Here's
Miquella's early
Melania.
years were clearly quite inspired by their father, Radigan, who, fostered a bit of a
I
fundamentalist
made
streak
it.
in his prodigal son,
Okay.
and Mikola would go on to invent fundamentalist
Great.
incantations
I'm
of
glad
his
for
own,
me.
dubbed Discus of Light and Triple Rings of Light, which he gave as gifts to his father. These gifts reveal that
All right, let's see.
Radigan and
Same-
Mikola had
same
a good
tactics.
relationship, and Radigan must have been
Let's
proud
get
of his
Lutel
son,
out
because these two
immediately and
spells do represent
get to
those
smacking,
two
see
key
how it
fundamentals
goes.
of the Golden Order, namely that there is a law of causality, which is a
Oh, wait,
branching
hold on.
cause and effect that goes outwards, but also that there
I
is a
should
law
try
of
to get rid of all
regression,
these
that
souls.
all things yearn eternally to converge once again. And in gratitude, Radigan countered with a gift of his own, showing Mikola Radigan's Rings of Light.
75K.
These incantations would go on to become core fundamentalist spells, as they are true to those two concepts that form the basis of the Golden Order. But there is another
30K.
aspect of Golden Order fundamentalism,
I
and
need
that
another
is
45.
persecution of those who live in death. Hunters of these undead would attempt to stamp them out with
That'll be
spells
enough.
such as
Yeah.
Order's Blade and Litany of Proper Death, which deal additional damage against those who live in death and prevent them from resurrecting. To recap, those who live in death exist because of Godwyn the Golden, who was one of the early sons of Marika and Godfrey,
All right, here we
who was
go.
eventually killed with a fragment of the Rune of Death, and then the Rune of Death would eventually spread its undeath throughout the lands between via Deathroot. And there is an entire debate that we could have here about whether the persecution of those who
we
live
can
in
knock
death
this out, like,
is even
first try.
true to the core principles of fundamentalism. Goldmask certainly doesn't seem to think so. In fact, according to the Order healing spell, Goldmask laments the hunters of those who
Oh
live
yeah, I
in
forgot to
death,
have a cutscene this time
meaning them
around.
to be fanatics who wanted nothing more than an absolute evil to contend with. And the reason I bring up this debate at all is because
That guy's a
you
very
could
interesting
argue
character
that
too,
Mikola
D.
was on the side of these fanatic
Oh, wild
hunters,
armor and stuff.
as he created multiple weapons that were capable of effectively slaying those who live in death. For example, this is Golden Epitaph, and it is a sword that was made to commemorate the death of Godwyn the Golden,
Grim
first of
looking
the
blade.
demigods to die. It is
It's very
infused
Warhammer
with the
40K,
humble prayer of a
actually.
young boy, and reads, "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." So this weapon is an effective tool of killing those who live in death permanently, and clearly the young boy who created it was Mikola. We can infer this because the sigil that appears when you use this blade's skill is the Halig Tree sigil, and once activated, this ability, called Last Rites, imbues the sword with a holy power that prevents those who live in death from reviving.
A fairly
Beyond this being a
uninteresting
potential tool to slay those who
effect
live in
as
death,
far as like
is that
gameplay, but
this weapon points towards an early
it's certainly an
kinship
interesting
between Mikola and
lore
Godwyn.
piece.
A relationship that might have made it all the more painful when Godwyn's soul would perish, but his body would remain, spawning Deathroot. This is interesting, as it gives Mikola a legitimate emotional grievance against those who live in death. And it's almost a bit hypocritical, I think, for what I believe to be Mikola's character, as we previously established that he might have been this character who wants all life to flourish, but I guess that principle might not extend.
Yeah, I mean,
to
if you're
those
living in
death.
death, if you're living in death,
This
you're not
sword
even
might not
alive
be
anymore.
The only representation of Mikola's relationship with Godwyn. That relationship is potentially strengthened even more when we consider this statue found in Alfheim before the Halig Tree. It depicts a larger figure who is clearly embracing the two Imperium twins, Mikola and Melania. But then, who is this larger figure? It could be their parent, Marika or Radigan, but then it doesn't have their signature hair braid, and instead it has this long, wavy hair. What's more, the statue asset is flat-chested, which appears to rule out Marika, at least. And after reading a good amount of debate online about this, I think it's a fair conclusion to say that this statue represents Godwyn, who himself does seem to have long
No.
hair. And this statue being enshrined here really tells us it's a story of two gifted but conflicted siblings who were supported by their older brother, but then they were left alone, as their older brother would become the first
She's healed all her health
to die.
again.
And this is the only statue in this location, far more prominent in the area are these statues, which
God
depict
damn it.
two siblings left alone after their
You do be sucking.
Mikola was forced to remain sympathy for his sister. And
No,
they
we're
fought
definitely
her
not
in
making it this
desperate
time around.
attempts to give her relief from her terrifying condition. So
She's way too healed back up again.
fundamentalism. It could do nothing to treat Melania's cursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed cold.
Man, one of my friends said that they really just cranked through using the rock sling and were able to beat her first try. I'm like, I don't understand how.
Usually because
I cannot
a stronger compound at the expense
get
of
that
its
shit to
So if we were to
work
view
long term.
as if it were a metal, which I think is something that the law wants you to do, considering the implications of the tarnished and everything like that, then Marika's Golden Order would definitely be an alloyed metal. Just think of all the foreign powers that it's absorbed in the interest
Melania
of strength.
really just sucks.
Godfrey and his crucible knights were enlisted to devastate his enemies.
Damn it.
The ancient dragons were won over and eventually became part of Flanders.
I'm already out of healing.
Even the house of the Erdtree and the moon were married at one point. Literally. After all, as Muriel puts it, all things can be conjoined under the Golden Order, so I think Marika was definitely open to using factions and ideologies to an extent, as long as it made her treasured Golden Order.
Yeah, Melania's still awful. Blade of Mikola. How
hopefully
appropriate
now
to be
you
watching the
understand
video
what I
about
mean
Mikola
when I
now.
say that Mikola's gold is unalloyed, it is pure, it is untainted, and it is perhaps a singular ideology.
We need some different
And if you
spells.
subscribe to the idea that the cut content is still representative of Mikola, then I would say that his ideology is what I had Mikola quote earlier, that in his new world, all things should be allowed to flourish, whether graceful or malign, and that is his pure ideology. Though, of course, that is my speculation based on cut content as well, so please keep that in mind. But Mikola's unalloyed gold couldn't have just been this metaphysical concept of
This
pure
might work for me.
ideology. It was a physical material as well. For example, this is an unalloyed gold water lily, said to have been beloved by Mikola. This is a bewitching branch, blessed with an incantation
it's gonna
of
be
unalloyed
better.
gold. Unalloyed gold decorated
Steadily
the
restores
armor and
HP.
shields of his soldiers. It was inserted into their weapons, and most importantly, perhaps, it was forged into a set of armor for his sister, Melania. Because remember, the whole reason Mikola
Wonder if I should
embraced
try the
unalloyed
Mimic
gold
tier
in the
for
first
this.
place, it seems, was because he thought that it could treat his sister's accursed rot, while fundamentalism could not. And he was right, for Melania's scarlet rot is no mere
Mimic
disease.
tier.
It's literally the divine essence of an outer god,
then we'll put
and
the
Melania
America's
is
Blessing
its vessel
here.
that will one day bloom into a true goddess. But unalloyed gold is one of the few materials in the game that can ward away such meddling of the outer gods. Another example are the mirror helms, like the one that Iji wears, which literally
really?
reflects the
I don't
influence
think
of
I
the outer
realized
gods.
that
And personally, I think the reason
they gotta
that
get more
unalloyed
into the
gold
outer gods.
inhibits the meddling
They're
of
so
the outer
interesting.
gods is
There's so
because
much-
it is a pure metal and potentially a pure ideology. But if that's not enough reason for you, then Quelaag actually has a great video where she breaks down potential reasons at a chemical level. But at any rate, reasons aside, Mikola crafted needles of unalloyed gold, which could be inserted into the tortured flesh of one afflicted by rot to alleviate their suffering and forestall the effects of the rot. And true to the needle's descriptions, the outer god of rot isn't the only one affected by this. Our character actually uses the final version of this unalloyed gold needle to subdue
tried
the
this
outer
one.
god of frenzy, which is something you might want if you decided to be a terrible person and burn down the world. Anyway, when we first find Mikola's needle, it's been broken,
Keep hitting.
snapped in half, and picked up by a commander at the very center.
I forgot to switch one of my
Once
items
this
again.
needle has been prepared, we can give the golden needle to Millicent, proving that it does
It's a
indeed
little
work
slow to
forestall
cast
erotic
this,
sickness,
but
to remove pain and nightmares from the afflicted. It is, after all, lovingly crafted by Mikola himself.
Well, this is a marvel indeed.
maybe I should charge it. It takes me a long time to cast anyway. Alright, this is working.
In crafting these needles and pursuing unalloyed gold, Mikola is attempting to save his sister.
Oh,
from
good
her
interruption.
affliction. It seems like this objectively good deed, which is a rare sight in Elden Ring, especially for a demigod whose strengths have been known to tip them towards madness. And that is what makes Miquella such a pure and likable character in Elden Ring. So it's no wonder really that Melania venerated her brother. She is a character of undefeated prowess, and she's an Imperial, no less. And yet, she
Please,
dedicated
just
her blade to
hit.
Miquella, and Miquella
What the
alone,
heck?
for she believes that he possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god, and that he is the most fearsome Imperial of all. The story of their bond and duty to one another is legendary, and that's something that becomes quite clear
phase.
when we explore Miquella's Halig tree and see these statues depicting their embrace all around. If you were one of the many father outcasts in Elden Ring, you too might have felt inspired by this story, and you might have felt inclined to earn Miquella's favor and make the long pilgrimage towards your salvation, towards the distant and divine Halig tree and its embrace that was Miquella's domain. So first, what even is the Halig tree? Well, it's pretty obvious that it's a sort of Erd tree. For one, Erd tree avatars have clearly emerged from it, which they only do in order to protect the Erd tree's own offspring.
Oh my god, that was so much damage.
Which confirms that the Halig tree ultimately failed to grow into an Erd tree. And one thing I've been wondering is, when exactly was the Halig tree planted then? If we knew when, then we might be able to...
Oh my god, that damage is insane.
Was it planted before or after the shattering of the Elden Ring? Because when the Elden Ring was shattered,
we're gonna have to
golden
freaking...
seeds flew from the Erd tree, scattering across the various lands as if life itself knew that its end had come. These seeds create these little illusory trees and likely spawned the minor
I don't think
Erd
that one
trees as
worked all that well.
So I think it's a fair assumption that Miquella might have planted the Halig tree from an Erd tree seed. And if that was indeed the case, then it should have happened after the shattering, for before that, the Erd tree was considered perfect and eternal, and it wasn't even believed that Erd tree seeds could exist. But on the flip side, the golden epitaph sword that we mentioned earlier likely existed before the shattering, as it was created to commemorate Godwin's death. And this sword displays the Halig tree sigil when its weapon art is activated, so one could infer that the Halig tree must have existed at this point too, right? So I guess it's always possible that Miquella somehow procured an Erd tree seed before the shattering, or simply grew it from his own being, as he is a scion of the Golden Bough after all. But whatever the case, Miquella clearly decided that growing such a tree was important, and he even went so far as to water it with his own blood. This confirms that the Erd tree is indeed a blood-sucking parasite. Just kidding. Sort of. I mean, you have to admit, it is pretty disturbing that an Erd tree could flourish in such a manner. But this does lead us to the final question, which is, why was the Halig tree planted? What was the point of it? And at the end of the day, the main reason is always going to be because it's like the Erd tree. It's natural to compare them, and the item descriptions seem to want you to compare them as well. The Erd tree is this enormous icon of power and faith in the lands between, so evoking that and inspiring worship is clearly a valuable thing. But the Erd tree was only really an icon of faith in its later years. Before that, it was a symbol of abundance, with light as warm as the gentle sun that could gradually heal all those who bathed in its rays. But perhaps most importantly, during this time of abundance, it would drip.
That does not hit as reliably as I would like. Not even a little bit.
Form crystal tears and even be embedded into talismans. These were treasured things. Naturally, this was an extremely valuable symbol for Miquella to evoke, since he is himself associated with dew and abundance in the cut continent. And his Halig tree did drip with dew. The greenish amber of the Halig tree can even be seen in cut content items. It even looks as if it's mingled with a bit of Miquella's own blood.
Running!
Such a green hue of Halig tree amber is also seen in the Halig tree knight sword, which is not a cut weapon. This was modelled after the Carrion swords, except it was embedded in amber from the Halig tree instead of glintstone. Okay, so the Halig tree is a great symbol of faith and power and abundance, and Mikola is related to abundance in the cut content. But what else does the Halig tree add in terms of value? Well, the Halig tree itself is something of a vessel fit for a god. Mikola plants himself inside it later on. Melania returns home to it, and speaking of it being a home, many other creatures have made their home within the tree, and within the grace that supports it as well. I guess you could also argue that the Halig tree might be a sort of a tool to be used. After all, Marika puts the Erd tree to use in such a way, using its roots to absorb people after their death, and perhaps even its branches to rebirth life. And then the Erd tree is later used as a prison with thorns that are almost entirely impenetrable. But I don't think Mikola planned to use the Halig tree in such a way. Perhaps the biggest difference between the Halig tree and the Erd tree is that the Halig tree was built in a largely inhospitable region. It is extremely difficult to reach.
Oh, we got it this time.
Like the Erd tree, it might not really be designed for the benefit of the vast majority of the world.
Okay.
As it stands, the Halig tree strikes me as being more like the Painted World from Dark Souls. It's a place for the outcasts, the heretical, and the malign, not to mention the low and the meek, who are specifically named in the description of the Sacred Crown Helm. While many of these Scarlet Rot afflicted.
Well, while Vadi has been yakking about Mikola, I've been slightly distracted in fighting Melania. So let's make a review of what do we think about the difficulty of Melania versus the difficulty of the DLC. I think there are some ways that Melania is harder and some ways that she is not. I think the main thing about Melania is that there are sort of more obvious, like, solutions to the problems that Melania presents. She has a few more gaps that can be exploited than mostly just the final DLC boss and the final DLC boss. Yeah, the final boss in the DLC. The thing is that I don't know if that's necessarily a fair perspective, just because of the fact that, like, I mean, Melania's been around for a long time, and so those gaps have been long ago learned. And we now know what best to exploit to get Melania killed. So, you know, maybe more clever solutions will be found for the final DLC boss. Maybe not. We'll see. I mean, I've certainly seen some spell. I don't think I ended up with this spell. I saw that there's apparently a super strong spell that I don't know if I actually had found. And now I'm wondering where it was that I would have gotten that out of the DLC, because apparently there's a good spell that I didn't see. Let's see, Elden Ring DLC Thorn spell. What was the Thorn spell? Not Impenetrable Thorns. New DLC spell locations. What are some of the other ones? I also don't know if it was a... Wait, is it Impenetrable Thorns? Hold on. Do I have Impenetrable Thorns? So I have one of the spells. One of the stupid... No, Mantle of Thorns. That's Mantle of Thorns. Impenetrable Thorns. Where's that? Do I have that? Impenetrable Thorns. I think that might be the one. I don't have that one. Where is it? Where'd that one go? In the specimen storehouse, make your way towards Mesmer's tower by climbing as far up the shadow keep as you can. When you reach the bridge to his tower, go down the flight of steps that you came up and look over the side of the platform. You'll see a bat enemy hanging. Carefully jump down into the bat and kill it. Against the wall nearby, you'll find a body. Oh, yeah. I don't have that one. Hold on. We're going on an adventure. Mesmer's Tower. That's up here. Go right back over there. Okay. Continue on, Vadi. You can continue talking about Mikola.
To be here because of the eventual
Carry on.
decay of the Halig tree. I think that
The
there are a
Halig tree.
number of refugees here that would have been here before that, namely the Misbegotten, the Crystallian, these astray mages of Raya Lucaria, and of course Loretta, who deemed this place to be a great haven for the despised Albinorics.
Oof.
The
I'm
second
having a lot
generation
more
Albinorics even
frame
carry a
issues
weapon
here than I
called
was in the main
the
game.
Ivory Sickle, which reads,
Probably
"These
because
weapons
I'm
are evidence of their dedication to the
also
Halig tree,
have the
despite never having entered its
video
presence."
going.
And we really
It's
don't
more
find
taxing
a
on my
single
system.
Albinoric within the Halig tree. I'll admit, I do find this a bit strange. You do find quite a few Albinorics so close to the Halig
must be
tree.
this guy.
It's a bit strange to me they don't go just that little bit further. The reason given for the first generation of Albinorics not being at the
did
Halig
miss
tree
this guy.
is given by Albus, who says that their faded legs are the reason
Okay,
for
now
that.
we're
But
going
yet,
up here.
we find them defending Mikola and his Halig tree all the same at the Ordina liturgical town, which takes us to the Halig
Wait, did
tree
I-
via a puzzle.
did I not
within an
unlock the
Everjail.
waypoint
the
up
word
here?
liturgical means relating
What?
to public worship,
okay, well,
and
that's fine.
this town is fittingly filled
That's a
with
silly thing
many
for me to have
statues
not
of
done,
Mikola sitting
but here we
alone,
go.
cradling what might have become the Halig tree back when it was still just a sapling. I also find it interesting that the Halig tree is never called out as competing with the Erd tree, or never called out for housing all these undesirables. Perhaps the
Gotta
House of
reset
the Erd
up all
tree
my
was
spells.
happy to see ungraceful folk leave their lands. Perhaps the Halig tree was extremely well hidden from everyone and they didn't know. Or perhaps Mikola could just
we're gonna
get
need
away
that.
with it because he was beloved by all. For example, the Bewitching Branch is an item that you can create from Mikola's lilies,
that
and
one,
it
that's
is
a cool
blessed with an
spell.
incantation of unalloyed gold.
Oh,
and it
impenetrable
reads,
thorns
"The Imperium
requires
Mikola
faith."
is loved by many people. Indeed,
Why does it?
he has
Why
learned
is it
very
faith?
well
Why is
how
it a
to
faith
compel
spell while
such
still
affection.
actually being a
And
sorcery? What the
that
heck?
second part that says he has
Well,
learned how
time
to
to level up
compel
faith, I
affection.
guess.
To me, that's saying that Mikola is very good at knowing how to inspire others' affection to his own advantage. And nowhere is this more clear, I think, than at Castle Sol.
Do I need any other spells?
This is the Halig Tree Secret Medallion. It's furnished with that signature green amber, and it features the Halig Tree in the background.
I don't think
for
so.
It allows you to access a
I mean, I
secret
might as well
lower
bring these
level
along,
of the
I guess.
Grand Lift of Rold and progress through the consecrated snowfields.
Hey, we're back
to
out and about.
this sacred place. Having both halves of this secret medallion is therefore extremely desirable.
So
For
ridiculously
the medallion has
complicated to
another
get
name.
to the Halig
It's
tree.
called Mikola's Favor.
Mikola's favor can be yours. Slaughter. Slaughter. Slaughter.
The finger crones are upsetting
All
sometimes.
hearing slaughtered. But alas, it was for naught. But all you need to
I think so.
is snatch it from the big pot.
I don't want to fight the
Gideon
freaking
is
dragon.
the all-hearing man in this dialogue, and he slaughtered an entire village just for one half of this medallion, but he did not
No.
find it in Albus's possession. But you can, and the other half is at Castle Sol, right before a nameless phantom who says this: Lord Mikola, forgive me. The sun has not been swallowed. Our prayers were lacking. Your comrade remains soulless. I will never set my eyes upon it now. Your divine Halig tree. So, this phantom seemingly has, or I guess had, one half of the medallion, and yet he laments that he will now never set eyes upon the Halig tree. To me, this suggests that Mikola might have been withholding the second half of the medallion from him, or that this phantom believed that he could solicit the second half of the medallion from Mikola
Ow.
and make it to the Halig tree if he achieved his goal here at Castle Sol and basically
Whatever
earned
that
Mikola's
might have
favor.
been.
But what exactly was supposed to happen here at Castle Sol? What does
Yeah.
it mean when the
What's
phantom
up with that?
says, the sun has not been swallowed, our prayers were lacking, your comrade remains soulless? It means, I think, that the residents of Castle Sol and Mikola were attempting to restore the dead soul of Godwyn the Golden. And just to refresh your memory, when a fragment of the Rune of Death was used to kill Godwyn, it was also being used at the exact same time to kill Rani, and since they perished at the same time, Rani lost her body, and Mikola's demigod brother, Godwyn, perished in Sol alone. And despite this death seeming
such an interesting
so final,
pairing,
Mikola clearly believes that some sort of ritual performed here could restore the soul of his comrade. For example, here's some more dialogue from a different phantom that reads, "O great sun, frigid son of Sol, surrender yourself to the eclipse, grant life to the soulless bones." But the question is how? How does that work?
Yeah.
How does an eclipse
How
restore
could that possibly
life to
happen?
Godwyn? Now, you can just take Mikola at face value and trust that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
or we can
well.
try to learn as much as we can about the eclipse and see if we can reason out the mechanism
Who knows
behind
what he's
this
thinking?
process. So, at Castle Sol, we find the Eclipse Shotel, which reads...
Which is a terrible
"Storied
weapon,
sword,
unfortunately.
a treasure of Castle Sol that depicts an eclipsed sun drained of color. In Sol, the sight
it's
of an
got lore
eclipse
value,
inspires a dreadful awe,
but it's pretty
preventing
shitty.
an onlooker from averting his gaze. The most important part of this description, though, is the part that says it's the storied sword of Castle Sol, as this proves
Hello,
that the
giant
veneration of
hand.
the eclipse here goes back a long way. But what does an eclipse represent? So, according to the Eclipse Crest shields, the eclipsed sun, drained of color, is the protective star of soulless demigods.
Doggo's coughing.
Honestly, I think calling it a protective star is kind of the closest we come to understanding the mechanism here, because you could reason that a protective star might be a sort of outer
Poor
god
doggo.
that lends them power, though that is just speculation. The description goes on to say that the sun
did I
in
make it all the
eclipse
way
is
to where
said
I was
be the
going?
symbol of the wandering mausoleum
Yeah.
where the soulless demigods slumber. So
He's
note
occasionally
that it
having a
says
rough time of
demigods,
it.
Plural here. Now,
Yeah,
this
there
could
we
be
go.
because the wandering mausoleums come to house many demigods from a gameplay point of view, because you can take their remembrance.
Yeah, what's the lore on the
Could be
wandering
already slightly
mausoleums?
lost in translation, as the Japanese version of the
What's
word
up with those
demigods
guys?
does not specify whether it's a plural or whether it's a singular word. So my take on this is that I think the wandering mausoleums became necessary when Godwyn died. I think that the mausoleum was intended to be a resting place for him initially, but then also for any future demigods. So
Oh, crap.
all of their true deaths had become
That's some shitty timing.
We've
Okay, we're doing real
also
poor.
the knights themselves are these headless soldiers who behead themselves and their master into death. As such, they become title mausoleums. They also carry eclipse crested shields. The eclipse is said to aid the mausoleum lords by keeping destined death at bay. It is their symbol, and by keeping destined death at bay, maybe it's helping to keep their souls tied to
Oh yeah,
the
that guy.
We could speculate for a long time on how the eclipse has this power, and I've done my best. Maybe other people would like to take
Ah,
on
shit.
Maybe you guys do in the comments. But in the end, it's simpler just to trust that Mikola knew what he was doing. He was in Castle Sol when he wanted to block out the sun and restore the soul. We can't trust him too much,
Ow.
I guess, because it's important to remember that this ritual failed. According to this phantom, the sun was not swallowed. So I guess the protective star of the soulless demigods did
There we
not
go.
listen to their prayers. It did not appear.
Gonna
But
yank his
it is
leg
really
off.
fascinating to learn that such a thing might even be possible. That Godwyn, whose soul seems to be
we're locked on here.
Rami's body, might actually be. His soul is somewhere. Where has it fled to? Part of me wonders if his soul is lost, and maybe it's lost in a dream. Maybe this is which Godwyn's soul is brought back by the eclipse, is that his soul is brought back by bringing about a sort of artificial dusk with the eclipse. That's because those who live in death are called duskborn, after all. So there is an
Damn, this spell is good.
association between night and
This is the anti-fire giant spell.
Sleep. For example, when you pursue the fears of respite, you use your as a medium to enter
Get absolutely cooked.
which is an entire dream state. The dragon Fortisax is futilely fighting against the death in his companion, and And then there's Roger, who speaks this line of dialogue as he is on the precipice of succumbing to Deathroot.
Maybe I should tell you. Lately, I feel I'm on the precipice of falling into a deep, fathomless slumber.
He does say he's about to fall into sleep. So, in conclusion, a realm of death does seem accessible through dream. And I think this is the perfect time to mention that Miquella has an alter ego. Some say she is a comely young girl. Others are sure he is a boy. This is where we have to talk about the enigmatic figure named Saint Trina.
Saint Trina, who we met in the DLC.
Perhaps the
Which is
biggest
also
in-game
an
clue
obvious
about Saint Trina's true identity
parallel to,
is Trina's lily,
like,
which bears
Radagon
this
and Marika.
undeniable resemblance to Miquella's lily of unalloyed gold. Its description reveals that it is a symbol of faith in Saint Trina, dulls the senses, preventing agitation. Naturally, it can be used to craft a bunch of sleep-afflicting items like Saint Trina's arrow, which states that the sweet oblivion of sleep can become quite the habit, and it tells of the priests of Saint Trina who use these arrows to spread their teachings, though the Japanese description seems to specify that these were more of a tool used for their rituals. So, it's largely left to your imagination as to what rituals these priests might have been performing, though I will mention that it seems Saint Trina might actually be able to be found somewhere within sleep. This is suggested by Feather's cookbook, which reads, a record of crafting techniques.
Is the
left
Land
by
of
a
Shadows?
man
Is that
who was
like a
utterly
dreamland?
captivated by
I don't know.
Saint Trina. He
That is
continued
unclear
the
to me.
search for her in his slumber. We get a side profile of her in the hilt of Saint Trina's sword, which hints at that flowing, astray hair that she has, and then we get a much better front-on view of this feminine adult form
with a weird
upon
eyeball.
Saint Trina's torch. The carvings depict Saint Trina, but in adult form, somewhat unnervingly. The carving is indeed unnerving, and it's certainly strange considering Miquella is supposed to be eternally a child. It raises the question, what has to happen for Miquella to grow up into this? And why is this bizarre creature the adult form that he takes?
Well, is it the only form that he can take?
I think is whether Miquella even has total control of Saint Trina. What if he's in a similar situation to
They are certainly separate now.
Their alter ego is an opposite of sorts, and able to act almost as if they have their own free will. So, all of this is definitely a little bit of a disturbing view of what Saint Trina could be, but I guess we do have cut content that does somewhat reassure me that their alter ego is still a benevolent person. This cut content was first showcased by Sekido Dubi, and this cut content is truly ancient. It exists in one of the oldest versions of the game that we know about, so a lot has probably changed since then.
Damn, that's so cool, though.
Here we can
What a
learn
mysterious
about Saint
world.
Trina's crystal ball, which once read, a crystal ball full of mist, symbol of Saint Trina of the Cradle Song, copies dream mist from a sleeping being. Dream mist was once used as an ingredient in rare and potent physics. May the quietude of slumber come to all and sundry, even to those whose red eyes burn with the flames of frenzy. So this reveals that this cut version of Saint Trina even once had sympathy for those afflicted by the flame of frenzy. They even went so far as to teach the merchants their songs.
Our soul derives from an old lullaby, sung for us long ago, deep inside our tomb. Whatever it was is no longer. This melody allowed us to sleep, despite the cursed flame.
The description of Miquella's songs as a lullaby is referenced by the modern-day sleep pod description, which reads, like a lullaby or a quagmire.
It's interesting to think of what
irresistibly draws its victims down.
What like the alternate world would have been, right? Like what was the first world envisioned for Elden Ring with that wildly old cut content, with like a whole different, like a whole new area, with Saint Trina being like this like adult woman with like an entire, you know, main sort of feature. It's interesting. Like, why? What was it? What was the point? How did it tie together? It makes me really curious of the world that could have been but was not. It's interesting. Anyway.
down into sleep. Sweet dreams. This is the closest thing we have to Dream Mist as well, which was an item that you could again once collect from sleeping enemies. And after you did this, you were supposed to sell this Dream Mist to the merchants, who used it to quell their flame of frenzy.
Oh, interesting.
But as the merchants once said, whoever it was that sings, now sings no longer. And this is a detail that has remained intact even in the final version of Elden Ring, with St. Trina's sword stating that St. Trina's arms was a sudden peace that disappears. Something literally happened to Mikael that prevented them from continuing their work as St. Trina. That is what we will discuss next. At some point, Mikael involved himself into the Halo Tree.
Ow!
Why he did this is never explicitly stated.
It's slapped by wings over here.
Make a good attempt at puzzling it out. So, Mikael famously built a healing tree with his own arm since it was a sapling. So, I guess you could argue that
I can't see. I can't see. I don't know what's happening.
Simply feed the tree more, which I guess is possible because the tree does eventually wither without Mikael inside of it, and Gideon seems to tie his removal with the death of the healing tree. It's turning into a husk. But I don't think that can be the only reason why he embedded himself. For instance, look closely at the Halig tree roots, and you'll see the form of a tree-like woman. And where her womb should be, there's a gap. A gap that once contained Mikola's cocoon, cradled by the Halig tree. Now,
oh no. No. Oh, come on!
This woman-like figure who
really one shot
the adult forms shown on St. Trina's
shenanigans.
Forge, or there was a rebirth occurring here. This is a cocoon within a womb, after all, so rebirth could have been the intent here. But regardless, it seems things ended prematurely, for Mikola would eventually be ripped out of the womb, and the Halig tree would split and decay. And so, when we arrive at the Halig tree and the town of Elfale that is built into the brace that supports it, the music here hits extremely hard. This place is just so beautiful. The Halig tree and Mikola's lilies and St. Trina's lilies are all wilting, and all who live here just hope and pray for their Lord to return. I love the little detail of the guards looking outwards.
Damn, you covered a lot of ground there.
To make matters worse for them, it was here that they realized that the sacred light inside of them exploded in the depths. And yet, in spite of this, its spirit meshes show their faithful end state. May the flash of our deaths guide Mikola's return. And Melania is here too, holding to the husk of Mikola, dreaming and waiting for Mikola to return, and believing full well that he will.
It's fine, we got him. Man, a little bit of added damage really goes a long way, doesn't it?
Melania's set reveals that she believes her brother will keep his promise. So what was that promise, I wonder? Was it merely to return, or was it something more? How much does Melania know? Why did she fight Radahn? We'll have to talk about all of that in another video. So there is still faith. There's even this one phantom in the consecrated snowfields who has somehow puzzled out who took Mikola, and even where they are, he is pointed towards the portal that takes you to Moglin Palace and Mohg the Omen. So, indeed, it was the demigod Mohg who somehow broke into the Halig tree and absconded with Mikola's infant form. And it's with him that the story ends. Or maybe it's where this story truly begins. So, if you're not familiar, Mohg is the Omen son of Godfrey,
and flopping around like a fish.
Being an omen of royalty, he was born into a wretched mire of filth in the subterranean shunning grounds below Lanedale capital. But unlike his brother,
we're getting to the good stuff. I can't wait for the next video where we actually talk about
it was assumedly because of this accursed blood
the DLC
that
stuff.
He chanced a meeting with an outer god called the Mother of Truth. And as Mohg stood before her deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire, and he was truly besotted with the defilement that he was born into. Moog is just one of many characters who discovers a new identity in the ways that they have been discarded by the world. And how could he not? For his defilement was validated by nothing less than an outer god. And as always, we know very little about this outer god. We know she is called the Mother of Truth, and the Formless Mother. We know that she desires wounds and bestows power upon accursed blood. Her followers can thrust their arms into her body to scatter blood flame, and followers of Moog can share.
That's where the blood flame comes from, is it?
Send blood flies before them. There's even been some speculation in my recent shorts and my TikToks
I did not
as
realize
well, that the Formless Mother is also an outer god called the Bloodstar. But the one thing that all outer gods seem to have in common is that they all require vessels to move through. So in this case, the Formless Mother's vessel was Moog.
It's an interesting.
The sacred spear that he wields is a weapon, but
it's almost interesting that you do not, as the player, get an opportunity to be the vessel to an outer god. All things considered, that feels like something that they would give the opportunity for. Perhaps in another DLC, we'll get there. But that feels like a natural outcome if they're saying that, you know, they need a vessel to move around. Well, I say that, but is that the Frenzied Flame? That might be the Frenzied Flame, I guess, technically. So maybe, perhaps they did. Ow. Perhaps I have spoken too soon. Well, and now I can't start the video again. I'm being beset by the undead right now. Give me a minute. Get the hell out of here. Alright. This is a safe spot. Carrying on. We're almost at the end of this one.
Also an instrument of communion, and Moog may well be doing her bidding with his actions.
Cool.
These actions included him starting a new dynasty called Moogland, deep below the earth, in the grounds of these ancient dynastic remains. This is a secret place, difficult to reach, and it was here that Moog brought the infant Miquella, torn as he was from his cocoon. I mean, that's how we see him in his opening cutscene, but in-game, Miquella seems to be back with a new cocoon here.
Yeah, he's just vibing in his new cocoon.
Upon this giant pelvic bone, which seems to be a reference to the womb of the Halig Tree woman that he was literally ripped from. And it's from the remembrance
a reference
of
to some kind of a womb, obviously.
Intent here. He wished to raise Miquella to full godhood and become his consort, taking the role of monarch. To this end, Moog has begun soliciting blood offerings to Miquella, and that certainly explains the state of so many who reside here. According to the Lord of Blood's exaltation talisman, he proclaimed, "Render up your offerings of blood to your lord.
Hey, Arunak.
Drench
I need
my
more of those.
consort's chamber, slake his cocoon's thirst. His awakening shall herald the dawn of our dynasty." And then, to return to Moog's remembrance, it stated that
I got to
so
know.
far, this has all been in vain. For no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber Moog tried to share, he received no response from the young Empyrean. So maybe nothing will happen. Or maybe, according to the Pure Blood Knight's medal, it is not yet time. For Moog yet slumbers beside the divinity. Be patient. The new dynasty is nigh. What do you think? I mean, it's kind of hard to know. Even Gideon has no clue. But something does seem to be happening to Miquella in there. He has clearly grown a while since being taken, so maybe his adult form is manifesting. Personally, and this is really speculation, but this reminds me a lot of Berserk, which we know Miyazaki
Miyazaki does love some Berserk.
Spoiler warning, really, you should watch that show, but There's this moment at the very end of the first chapter where Griffith betrays his companions in this sacrificial ceremony of carnage and bloodshed in order to be inaugurated and reborn as a god within an egg of sorts. This really reminds me of that. It also reminds me of a scene with Griffith where he allows himself to be abused, basically, in order to get what he wants. So I wonder what if this was also what Miquella wanted. We know that he is extremely proficient at compelling others to love him.
That is
and
true.
Moog is clearly enraptured. We know that Miquella is an Empyrean prodigy, and we know that his sister, who knows him
here's the
best,
God
faith
skin
that he
duo.
will return. So you'd think he's still in control of the situation somehow, but that could be a part of the tragedy. And Miquella, this benevolent being, might not have predicted this at all, and is now being completely taken advantage of. Maybe he did intend to be taken, but he's going to get more than he bargained for with the Mother of Truth. Or maybe Miquella's faith really is long gone. There's one other thing I want to mention. There is this place called Miquella's Hideaway in the Altus Plateau, and here we can loot Amber Starlight, which Celadus mentions is the very fate of a demigod. Clearly, since it's here, you'd think it's Miquella's fate, right?
Freaking cooking
them.
them.
You also have to consider that the cut content that we are basing so much of this video on is very much removed from the game, because it might not fit the
Can I have another one? I did this too fast.
Possible. So I really do hope you will bear that in mind, as I really hate to promote ideas that are against the developer's vision for this character. But I really do think that it's a possibility that we're going to one day enter the dream of this slumbering demigod. After all, there was once a cut character called Rico who was supposed to say the following, standing before
You guys just freaking die crazy fast.
Finally, I have found it. Centrinas.
Ow.
Lord Miquella's cadaver, such that I may aid
Done.
you.
Easy.
So please, I hope you welcome.
I never had
Sir
troubles with
Rico
these guys. I don't know
into your
why.
dream, the
Lots of
world
people
your
did.
heart.
I
Indeed,
did
I
not.
beg you grant my wish, that when you transcend from Empyrean to God, allow me a place by your side. Plus, if we do get DLC, it's going to need a new Great Rune to acquire, right? That's
Did
a
I get
huge
a new Great
gameplay
Rune?
mechanic in these games,
don't think-
and it'd be weird.
I don't think I did. All right. Well, regardless, now we get to go to the lore revelations in the DLC. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to learn.
As soon as you
What do we
entered
got
this
going on?
place, you knew that we were going to get some answers in the shadow of the Erd Trail.
Oh, yeah.
And we have. There are satisfying revelations regarding Queen Marika and Miquella and the Omen and dragons and the gods. We even now know what Melania whispered to Radahn in this scene before her scarlet flower bloomed in Caelid. This video will only scratch
Did
the
we? Damn,
surface.
I did not,
It's just an overview, a teaser
into
of
enough,
new
clearly.
revelations and the foreshadowing of a deeper analysis to come. So let's get into it, and
I can't
this
wait for
time,
more
Let's
analysis.
begin. At the
This
end.
is all we got for now. We'll just have to deal. You'll have to
After you
come
defeat
back
the final boss,
without
promised
me
consort
to see the
Radahn,
rest.
on your 400th
Which is why you should definitely go
read the
subscribe to Vadi.
remembrance of a god and a
Vadi
lord,
Vidya.
which states,
Link in the
in
description.
their childhood, Miquella saw in
Because
Radahn
he's
a
so
lord,
good
his
at all of
strength
this.
and his kindness that stood in stark contrast with their afflicted selves. The cutscene that plays here is a memory.
Okay, that's what we're trying to get to over there.
I'm going to be a god.
Ah, yes, I do recall that
We
cutscene.
honor our part of the vow. I'll make the world a gentler place.
And so Miquella made his heartfelt wish that Radahn would one day be his king consort. Now, this ending and the reappearance of Radahn has received a lot of early criticism, but
Really?
I think this encounter does go a lot deeper than some people are giving it credit for. For example, we're hearing about Miquella's side of the vow in this scene, and about what Miquella wants, but what about Radahn? What was his part of the vow? What did he want? There is evidence of Radahn being kind, sure, but this is also a man who celebrates war. Did he truly share Miquella's vision for
Was he
an age of
compelled?
compassion? And if he wanted to be with Miquella, why did he fight so vehemently against his death in the
And why
lands between?
is he only
That
here
would have brought his
because
soul
we
to the
killed
realm of
him?
Shadow with Miquella. But the most chilling thing about this story, I think, is that even if Radahn did want to become Miquella's lord, and I can see that side of the argument too, to be fair, but even if he did want that, do Radahn's wants even matter in the face of Miquella the Kind? As we speculated long ago, from items like the Bewitching Branch, Miquella has the power of enchantment over others. He has the power to
He gets what he
steal
wants.
hearts. Literally, if you are embraced by him twice in the final fight, your heart is stolen. It's like a part of you dies.
Lord
I wondered
of
what
the
that
old
would
order.
I never got
us
caught
go
a second time,
together.
apparently. Heart stolen.
This effect can also be seen
Interesting.
in Miquella's faithful band, who overcome their
Interesting.
differences and shortcomings
never had that happen to me.
fight for Miquella's cause, until Miquella's enchantment is broken, and they turn at each other's throats. And what makes Miquella a fascinating character is that he isn't manipulating others for selfish reasons. His cause actually
I'm not
is
close enough.
righteous. When he wields love as a weapon, he does it genuinely to make the world a better place, without any intent to cause harm. However, such acts are still impressive. If your want is
I can't
taken
get out of the way of that.
what is left of you that remains? Perhaps the saddest example of this is Moog, who, as we speculated, was indeed under Miquella's spell.
Once, in an attempt to free Lord Moog from his enchantment, I challenged tender Miquella, only to have my own heart rather artfully stolen. I knew not how weak I was. I believed that with sufficient mastery, even an Empyrean would be within reach of my hand. I could not have been more mistaken. Miquella the Kind is a monster, pure and radiant. He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
In the specimen storehouse, you can find the secret rite scroll, which details the secret rite by which Miquella will ascend to godhood. It reads, "A lord will usher in a god's return, and the lord's soul will require a vessel."
Like an outer will.
Ansbach reveals Miquella's plans in full.
Similar fashion.
After Lord Moog's slaying at his dynastic palace, it appears his body has been absconded with and taken straight to kind Miquella.
I
As if
see.
using Lord Moog to gain entrance to the land of shadow were not enough, he plans to use his corpse as the vessel of his king consort. He has
I see.
forsaken Lord Moog's soul. He desires only his empty shell.
In your fight with Radahn,
Rude.
you might have noticed the horns sprouting from his gauntlets, and
I did
his
notice
tendency
that.
to perform blood flame attacks. This is because Radahn occupies Moog's body, fulfilling the terms of the secret rite at the Gate of Divinity, where Miquella will become a god. So, in retrospect,
Every little
Moog
detail
was
is
under
very
Miquella's
important.
spell all
It's
along
kind of
and
incredible.
became obsessed with Miquella, believing that they would ascend together as Lord and God. But Miquella had plans for Moog, not just as a corpse to pull into the realm of shadow as a vessel for Radahn's soul, but as Ansbach reveals, Moog was also used as a means for Miquella to enter the realm of shadow in the first place. A while back I speculated that the realm of shadow was a sort of death dimension, and that Miquella's sacrilegious
seems
death
sorta
at the
like
hands of
that.
Moog might have been intentional so that Miquella could enter the realm of shadow, and actually surprisingly those speculations were proven correct as well. Ansbach confirms
He really is
that
good
Moog
at the
Miquella dead,
guessing
and
what's
the
going
temple of
on.
suppression makes it
Bro,
clear that
get the
all
hell out of
manners
my way.
death wash up in the realm of shadow, which lies at the very center of the lands between. Incidentally,
Oh, come on.
one of the biggest mysteries,
That's some bullshit.
which was
That's some bullshit.
to Radahn. as she let the rot flower blossom at the end of their fight. According to the young lion's helm, she whispered, "Mikola awaits thee, O promised consort." And so Melania's southward march to Caelid is finally explained as well. She was there to kill Radahn so that his soul could be taken to the realm of Shadow and the vow could be upheld at any cost. Once transported to the realm of Shadow, Mikola set off for the tower.
Which makes me kind of wonder,
on the way, he abandoned everything. His golden flesh, his blinding
was Melania also being bewitched, or did she just actually love her brother?
And be reborn as a new god.
Mikola has said as much himself. He wishes now to throw it all away. He says the act, though undoubtedly painful, will sear clean the Earth Tree's wanton sin. The truth of his claim can be found at each cross, which is evidence enough to earn my belief.
But what was the Earth Tree's sin that Mikola died and was reborn for? Well, now we've talked about the end. This brings us to
crying out loud.
Mikola the Kind spoke of the beginning. The seduction and betrayal. An affair from which gold arose. And so too was Shadow born.
These words come from Marika. While she never says them in game, they're pretty damn important, because with Marika in the footage, it's clear that this was her seduction and her betrayal. That was the affair from which gold arose and Shadow was born. The same music that played in that moment also plays here, in the village where it all began, the Shaman village, to the northeast. At its center is this.
Yeah, what's up with the Shaman village?
An incantation which reveals that this was Marika's home, which she one day bathed in gold. So, Marika's home was a Shaman village. The implication clearly being that she herself was a shaman. This was likely a matriarchal society of Numen women, though that's perhaps speculation better left for another video. Put simply though, a shaman is defined as someone who has influence in matters of the spirit. Its spirituality is what's valued here, and it's on this point that this story takes a bit of a dark turn, for the message at the hidden entrance actually reads, "Have mercy for the spirited away shamans." Adjacent to this message is the statue that moves aside at the sign of the "O Mother" gesture in Messmer's Shadow Keep. This emote is a clue to the truth, and it actually leads us all the way down here to where the "O Mother" gesture can be found. This dire place is called Bonny Village, and a phantom at the whipping hut here elaborates on just who the shamans were, or rather, the value they had. He states, "For pity's sake, your place is in the jar, nigh sainthood itself."
Wait, how am I this far back? Jesus.
For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life you recorded for this alone. So the shamans, in the words of their abusers at least, were accorded life for a singular purpose, and that was to be stuffed inside of jars with others. A nearby whip, bestrewn with rotting, misshapen teeth.
That explains why they all look like Marika.
And why it was used on the shamans. For one, it states that the pain it inflicts was used to encourage their obedience, but additionally, it says that as their wounds ripen, they grow inflamed and ooze pus, and the flesh of shamans was said to meld harmoniously with others. So it is that the shamans stuffed into jars become this living amalgam of beings.
Yeah, I remember those.
With the flayed shaman herself at the fore. So now we know what happened to the shamans. They were whipped into submission and forced inside of jars. We know a little bit of the why as well. Apparently it was done so that they could become saints. But the next question I want to answer is,
cool.
Who did this to them? Well, it was the Hornsent. The caterpillar mask worn by Hornsent himself reveals that it was a ritual implement of the greater potentates of Bonny Village, which is this very village where we just discussed the evidence of the shaman's abuse. It goes on to state that the mask was used to ward off thoughts of impurity, doubt, temptation, and other wickednesses one is vulnerable to while absorbed in divine ritual. And man, if you need to ward off thoughts of doubt and wickedness while you're stuffing flayed people inside of jars, maybe what you're doing is just straight up wrong.
Yeah, maybe you should just stop.
Why Marika purged the realm of shadow with fire.
Yep, that's becoming more obvious.
They're never saints. They just happen to be on the losing side of a war.
But if this mask wasn't proof enough of the Horn Scent being responsible, look at Ballarat Jail. It's below Ballarat itself, which was the settlement of the Horn Scent, and to this day the innards and the shamans remain, with the shamans offering their prayers to the innards of the great jars, such that they might be reborn one day into sainthood. But what is sainthood? Well, it's never explained directly. I do have some ideas, but they might have to wait for another video. What we do know is that the
killing us with teasers here. Come on, Bonnie.
Divinity, and forcing the shamans to achieve sainthood was likely one facet of that. So, it's the Horn Scent.
So is that related to Saint Trina? That's the only other one that I can think of that uses the name Saint.
Ritualistic people, with swaths of their culture devoted to spiritual research and invoking the divine. And one of the most sacred things to them is the crucible, which they have to thank for their tangled horns, which are considered an evolutionary gift. If you didn't know, the crucible has been long established as this primordial form of the Erd tree.
Sure.
A blending of life that became the Erd tree's
God damn it.
energies.
Come on!
And apparently, it originated in the place that became the realm of shadow. This becomes quite clear thanks to Devonia, who is the longest-serving of the Crucible Knights. According to her helmet, she quested in search of the Crucible's origin, and departed from the lands of the Erd Tree alone. Another item we can find that's a clue for the Crucible is Spira, an incantation for a spiral of light. The spiral, it says, is a normalized Crucible current that, one day, will form a column that stretches to the gods. Maybe it's no coincidence that the White Tower of Ballarat is a spiral, nor that it culminates in a divine gateway that is a column of the dead, stretching to the gods. There's also trees that include the dead, but I digress, I'm getting off topic.
There's a lot of dead.
Marika, because at some point it seems Marika rose to prominence within, or adjacent to, this Horn Scent culture. We can kind of infer this because Horn Scent refer to Marika's eventual purge as a betrayal, and something can only really be a betrayal if you were aligned with them in the first place, right? So the Horn Scent were aware of Marika, and likely her own tree as well, before what they call the betrayal. But how? How did Marika rise to such power in their homeland, where she was presumably a shaman? One of those subjugated.
Ow.
Before there was this betrayal, there was a seduction from which gold arose.
Ow.
I think the fingers.
Shit. Okay. Okay. Okay.
The conceits, the hypocrisy of the world built upon the Erd Tree. The follies of men. Their bitter suffering. Is there no hope for redemption? The answer, sadly, is clear. There never was any hope. They were each of them defective, unhinged from the start. Marika herself, and the fingers that guided her. And this is what troubles me. No matter our efforts, if the roots are rotten, then we have little recourse.
Emil is the high priest of Manus Meta, the cathedral of the hand to the east. Once he instructed Romana herself in the sorcerous arts, but eventually he would come to this allegiance to the moon, stating that the moon was merely the closest of the celestial bodies, and nothing more.
I am the Visualdon sorcerer. We study the stars and examine the life therein. Are you familiar with our findings? Long ago, we began as stardust.
Damn, it's hard to get out of the way up.
Structure far across the skies. We too are children of the greater will.
Ah.
Is that not divine? Is that not sublime?
I hate. There's so much ranged shit that he does to me.
In the ruins of this land, and beneath Manus Meta itself, are the echoes of that greater truth that Ymir glimpsed. This is Meta herself, the mother of Fingers. Her remembrance reads, the mother of all two fingers and finger creepers was in turn a magnificently gleaming daughter of the greater will, and the first shooting star to fall upon the lands between. You might recall the Elden Ring and the Elden Beast made landfall in the lands between on a star as well, but Meta came even before that. So it was that this mother birthed the fingers, communing with and receiving signs from the greater will, who occupied the great beyond. But at some point, Meta became broken, abandoned, and no sign has come through ever since.
Of course, I said, the Meta and the fingers that guided her were unsound from the start. Well, the truth lies deeper still. It is their mother who is damaged and unhinged. The fingers are but unripe children, victims of their own right.
It's not clear when Meta was broken, abandoned, but I assume it was before America started taking the guidance of the fingers, since Ymir states that the fingers were unsound from the start.
Okay, God, that was unreasonably close.
And has been for all of Marika's reign. That's a pretty big revelation. Incidentally, Placidusax was also Elden Lord before Marika, and he was abandoned by his god as well, so maybe things became broken around that time? Lots of speculation to be had there.
Placidusax is an interesting one as well.
Abandonment by the greater will, or no, Marika took up the power of the Elden Ring that the fingers offered for her own reasons, and the abandoned fingers spread the glory of the greater will through her, and she through them. Another important item on this topic is the ancient seed talismans that can be found, which depict the two fingers around an Erd tree seed. They had a hand in the birth of the Erd tree. All
Interesting.
while,
I didn't
the
notice
fingers
those about
claimed
those.
to be envoys for the greater will, but that's a lie. The greater will is gone. The fingers are alone, operating on outdated guidance. This is something
they're
that many
making shit up.
suspected, but most characters in Elden Ring assumed that this happened around the time the Elden Ring was shattered. It's a revelation that the fingers have been broken for a really long time. And so the Tarnished too is a loop, following this guidance of grace that now likely only belongs to herself, if anyone. And Marika might have played friendly with the Hornsent for a time, but eventually she had what was surely vengeance. The Hornsent were purged, subjugated, and betrayed. The realm of shadow became this disconnected domain of death, and the shadow tree that gives the way became the realm's sin and of grace. Before she left, Marika bathed the village of her home in gold, placing a small illusory tree that restores the health of those who find. She did this before now was left to heal. Then she left, never to return.
Shit.
She left behind to endlessly enact her subjugation of the world of shadow. So, next, let's talk about Vesper, the Impaler. As anticipated, Vesper is entirely loyal to his mother, his Queen Mary. His only is that on his mother's wishes,
Wow, he gets cooked.
made himself a symbol of fear, undertaking the cleansing crusade she designed. And in the end, all those stripped of the grace of gold would perish.
In the embrace of Mesmer's flame.
To this end, he had his Black Knights, Fire Knights, and common infantry, not to mention the Carrion forces who followed R'hllana into war on Mesmer's behalf. So it was that the Hornsent were purged in a war without end. A phantom at Castle Ensis bemoans, "O Marika, I beg, embrace your child, and give us a sign. How long must this holy war stretch on?" But Marika never returned, testing their faith. One phantom even raises the possibility that,
you know, hearing some of this that he's saying, especially about the fact that, like, the outer will is, like, lost, and primarily the two fingers are sort of, like, running on their own shit. That feels to me like it is setting up a very interesting potential next DLC to be more in conflict with the two fingers, perhaps. Like, I don't know. I feel like more and more that they may be pushing towards you know, the next big conflict revealed to be moving into sort of the space outside the Lands Between, to go into conflict with wherever the outer will came from, and or, you know, wherever the two fingers have come from. Because now that we know they're, like, there's not a real sentience controlling them and they've gone rogue, maybe we go and, like, eliminate the two fingers where they came from. Texture, are you okay? It's not okay. The texture is not okay. But who knows? That is mere speculation.
Mesmer himself has been abandoned, and he has. The final straw for him is when you, a tarnished who would become Elden Lord, arrives at his doorstep.
Ooh, textures, you are having a bad time.
I will not suffer to stand before the
Oh, shit.
a lord devoid of light.
All right, we're stopping. We're stopping. All right, we're back alive? Good old Elden Ring with its freaking, I don't know, whatever memory leaks that are taking place for. Okay, we're alive again. We're no longer dead. Freaking memory leaks, mang. It's rough out here. We are approaching the conclusion of the game, though. Amusingly, we're making good progress here. Can I do it by the time we wrap up? Maybe. We'll see. I am no speedrunner, to be sure, but we're making good progress. All right, back to what you were saying, buddy.
No, Mother. Forgive me.
Oh, right, the eye plucking. Right. Yikes. Big yikes. Oh, I guess I didn't save my leveling. Still not sure why I did that. Body, could you explain, please? Oh, rune art. Neat.
Soon tarnished. Wilt thou be?
Oh yeah, Kappa. I don't know what the hell YouTube has been doing with the chat. It's really a mess. It freaking sucks.
Shorn of light.
Like his siblings, Mesmer was born cursed. In fact, the game likens his curse to Melanus, who is heavily implied to be his younger sister. Mesmer, too, it is said, bore a vision of fire. We learn this from the item Mesmer's Kindling, which describes the fire that endlessly burns within him, a dark thing eaten away at by a wicked serpent. His remembrance elaborates on this serpent, stating a malevolent snake lies within Mesmer, and so his very mother plucked out his eye and put in its place a seal of grace. So I was wrong with this eye. It wasn't the slitted eye of dragon communion. Instead, it was Marika's seal of grace, holding back something terrible. The description continues to state that even with this seal in place, Marika's fear compelled her to secret away her child within the realm of shadow, hidden away, keeping company with the original sin.
Get outmaged, Gideon.
There's so much more to say about this space serpent and the dark fire. There's so much more to say about Mesmer. We even learn from Gaius's remembrance that Mesmer was an older brother to Radahn, meaning Mesmer's birth, and thus the birth of Melina as well, likely would have arrived much earlier in the timeline.
Interesting.
And there's a ton of curiosities with Mesmer's knights as well, some of whom were loyal, some who were disloyal, and some of whom occupied this space of reluctance in between. But those stories are better off in other videos. In the interest of moving on, there is one last thing I want to talk about with Mesmer, and it's that in the cut dialogue, Mesmer notes that Miquella has spoken of us to him, and indeed we do know that Miquella did come through this shadow keep, divesting himself at the crosses all the while.
Right.
Which brings us to our next topic, Saint Trina.
Yes.
Each cross of Miquella is a piece of himself, marked with his great rune.
Right.
Arms, an eye, flesh.
Did I get Miquella's great rune?
There's a couple of crosses in particular that I remember as a part of what was an extremely chilling moment. As you progress along the coast towards the fissure, you notice that Miquella has divested himself of his doubt and vacillation. Without these things, he was free, it seems, to abandon something that was very dear to him.
Getting rid of doubt is maybe not the best idea.
What is
no
perhaps
second
the
guessing.
deepest part of the land in the realm of shadow, we realize that Miquella has actually divested himself of his love. A phantom says, "Kindly Miquella, I see you've thrown away something you should not have under any circumstances. How will you salvation
This is useful. I was not keeping track of all of the things he had abandoned.
Even save your other self. His other self, his love, his fate was Saint Trina. So to Miquella, who was one of Marika's kin, having a second self is nothing new, really. We've now even learned from the shamans that their flesh melds harmoniously with others, after all. Actually, the fact that Saint Trina was able to be discarded might even suggest that Radagon could have become divested from Marika in a similar way. But Miquella's other half was truly special, and she was renowned for granting peaceful sleep to many in the lands between, which I imagine would have been very much appreciated in this land that's filled with the weary and dead. So Saint Trina naturally had many followers, and perhaps at the fall
feel a love lost, haunted by me. But Citrina, her visage, her sand, a velvety sleep. But kindly Mikola chastened me.
Shit.
For Citrina, and I knew she was the discarded half. The problem is, I simply cannot help me. I would sacrifice just to gaze upon her.
Oh, God.
St. Trina is below, defended by a malfeasant entity. It's basically tainted flesh, once given eternal rest, that now serves St. Trina. Die enough times to St. Trina's nectar, and you will hear her words.
Whew. Easy.
All of this makes you realize that if godhood really would be Mikola's cage, as St. Trina believes, then it really might have been Marika's cage as well. It echoes what the Soul Seals suggested long ago, that solemn duty weighs upon the unbeholden, not unlike a gnawing curse from which there is no deliverance. In the end, Marika's cage divinity is likely a part of why she shattered the Elden Ring. And so, Mikola's divinity would surely come at a cost to him. He would essentially be sacrificing himself to bring about that gentle age in the name of everybody who would fall under his enchantment. And this enchantment is a tendency that Mikola regains when he returns in full force as a god, because once charmed by Mikola, a circlet of light adorns your head, and according to the description of the circlet of light, which you receive after Mikola's defeat, this enchanting circlet would have been the foundation of Mikola's Age of Compassion, not the Elden Ring. Presumably, in his age, all would be charmed. But Mikola found one that would refuse to be embraced. You. No wonder, as one god and one king consort is all the world needs.
There we go.
And you're the chosen Elden Lord of a different age, whatever ending that may be for you. So, naturally, you would have refused to be embraced. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to me, even with my nasally COVID voice. Sorry about that.
All right. Well, that's certainly some interesting stuff. Let's go back to the live scene. This is well timed, in fact. So a lot's been revealed there, but I look forward to sort of the future when I'm sure Vadi will do another deep dive, because I think there's a lot left unanswered still. I'm really bad at reacting to these things, is really what it comes down to. I like watching them. It's very interesting. But it is what it is. I wonder if we'll ever get to find out Radahn's take on it, right? If though there will ever be information revealing whether Radahn was there intentionally or simply was not able to get out of the bewitchment. Because I'm certainly interested in that. Oh, I should have... maybe it doesn't matter. So this is the final boss, by the way. Ow. Ow. Okay, that does do a lot of damage. But I gotta do it at freaking point-blank range for it to really do that much damage. Oh, right. I forgot that he deflects projectiles like a fiend. That makes that even more useful. Ow. Alright, so what's gonna work best on you, eh? I think he's weak to fire, if I remember correctly. That's not the right spell. That's not gonna do it. Okay, that's fine. That was a bad run. I'm gonna need stuff that he can't deflect. I don't think either of these are going to end up being useful. That will be useful later. Let's bring that. I wonder if the glintstone nail would be any better. We'll give it a try. Oh yeah, and I remembered that the Elden Beast is actually probably going to be an easier fight, because I forgot they patched in the ability to ride Torrent in the fight, actually. Ow. 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 Stop! Okay, I might actually have to do this, you know, straightforward with a freaking sword. It's not usually my style, but... Ah, shit. Okay, that didn't get me out of there. Oh, that bastard. Shit. You know, at the very least, this final boss is much easier than the other final boss. Like, final boss to final boss, it's no comparison. Well, I mean, this one is a two-phaser, but like, Not even close. We'll go ahead and watch the cutscene while we're here. Might as well. I don't have very many healing items left, though. This will be a little bit tight, but I think I should be able to overpower it using the shard spiral. It's the Radagon sword. It's fleshy and weird. I don't care for that. Such a cool looking fight. Damn it. Shit. Oh yeah, we're cooking him. We're cooking him. Chasing him. We're chasing him down. Where'd he go? He's over there. Come back here, you ass. Ow! Done. Easy. Yeah, so I think the main difference between the final enemies of the base game and the final enemies of the DLC is that the sort of glaring weaknesses of the bosses have been filled. So there's no obvious win. There's no like clear weakness to take advantage of, at least that I'm aware of. It's entirely possible that there are more of them and that really they're not that hard. But it's like, it's hard to say because I know better how to fight these guys, so like it went a lot easier. This is actually an ending that I haven't seen. Just straight up mending the ring is not one that I have done. So might as well do that one. Yes, that is a head. That's Marika's head. specifically. This is the lame-o ending, technically.
The fallen leaves.
I had never done the lame-o ending.
A story of how a tarnished became Elden Lord. In our home, across the fog, the lands between.
I'm also curious about the lands that are outside of the fog, like where we live.
And recall an age.
Look at me. So fancy.
Fracture.
So fancy. I do be styling. Yay, an achievement I hadn't gotten. Thanks. Okie doke. No, not yet. Well, I have now completed New Game Plus, in fact. A thing that I had not done previously. Alrighty then. Well timed, I think. Turning off my controller over here. How long have I been streaming? I don't even know. What is that, 3 hours? You know, 3 hours good enough. Well, that draws to a conclusion our adventure in Elden Ring for now. So that's a good time. Enjoyed that again very much. Excellent DLC. We wrapped up the base game. Another time. Another achievement that I did not yet have. So that's great. I am not sure what's next, honestly. Well, Kappa, I was actually contemplating doing Final Fantasy VIII next. I hadn't had a chance to see if that's something that you would want to be on the line for. Like, you could just call in and hang out and we can talk about the memories that were Final Fantasy VIII. Because we were talking about finding a JRPG, and I wasn't really sure, you know, what I'd want to do. But yes, Final Fantasy VIII was on sale on Steam, so I picked that up. And I've got to do a little bit of prep because there's some mods I want to get installed. But I thought that would be a fun one to hammer through. It probably wouldn't take too terribly long, all things considered, because we'd be bum rushing it as we always do. But that could be fun. So, all right, sounds like you're stoked about that. So I will carry on with that plan. And then other than that, after that, I should say, I don't know. I'll figure something else out. I'm not sure what exactly is coming. But that's going to be it for tonight and for Elden Ring. So thanks all for hanging out and tuning in. Look forward to another story time tomorrow. And then I got to get recording some future story times, but look forward to the Edgar Allan Poe story times coming soonish. But yeah, thanks all for hanging out again. Have a good evening. Get some good rest. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I will see you next time. All right. Bye.
Initiate
Initiating goodnight sequence. Dispersing appropriate dosage of compound 347. Initiating phase 1 of memory calibration. This won't hurt a bit. Just close your eyes.